I need it! Let's go! The guy!
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. And right off the bat, we already got a comment from one of our members. Will Sanchez writes it and says, hi everyone, hi Anna, great job last night. I was on CNN last night, especially fending off the New York Post columnist and Betsy Death Panel's McCoffey. I did not know who that woman was. And I'm happy to forget about her, but if you watched me on CNN last night, she was a former lieutenant governor from what I gathered, and she seemed a little bit out to lunch, seemed to kind of confuse some of the stories that we were talking about. But anyway, that's beside the point. We've got a good show ahead for you. I say good because I flew in from New York today. I'm pretty exhausted and moody, but we've got amazing stories that have been produced by our fantastic producers. We're gonna start off with the reality of the fact that there's no real ceasefire in Gaza. So we're gonna get into the details of that. We'll also talk about how there still aren't any international journalists allowed in the Gaza Strip, but as Israel prepares to invite them in, they're thinking about how much of a PR nightmare Gaza happens to be for the Israelis. So they are making plans to mitigate some of that bad PR. So we'll get into those details. And then there were some elements of Tucker Carlson's conversation with Nick Fuentes that we didn't have enough time to get into yesterday. So we're gonna revisit that story and more. From what I gather, Zionists are very upset that that conversation took place. So, you know, two people can have a conversation. If you don't like it, you can just decide, I don't wanna listen to it. I do that all the time, but anyway, for now, why don't we start off with what I think is one of the more important stories of the day, and that is the current situation in Gaza and the fact that even though the Trump administration would have you believe there's a truce, there's a ceasefire, facts on the ground prove otherwise.
Gazans thought this kind of trauma was over, but no. As the airstrikes continued overnight, casualties mounted, among them children. One missile hit a camp next to Aqsa Hospital in the center of Gaza, where patients and their families were sleeping. God help us, said Amna Kranawi. What kind of a truce is this? It's a fragile one, with both sides accusing the other of violations.
Maybe it's the fact that I've been doing this job for nearly 2 decades and I'm just kind of fed up with just the endless euphemisms, the lies, the lack of straight talk. So let me just give you straight talk right now. There is no ceasefire in Gaza. When over 100 people get slaughtered in a single night, that's not a ceasefire. So with that in mind, last night, at least 104 Palestinians were slaughtered by the Israelis in airstrikes across Gaza. 46 of them happened to be children. But if the Israelis aren't slaughtering children, what else would they be doing? It was the deadliest attack since the so-called ceasefire came into effect on October 10th. They burned children while they were asleep. Haneen Meter, whose sister and nephews were killed in a strike, shouted in the morgue at Nasser Hospital in the southern city of Khan Yunis. This just happened last night. And the response that you will inevitably get from Israel's defenders is, what about October 7th, 2023? Because those lives mattered. The lives of Palestinian children, innocent civilians in Gaza, they don't matter at all. Please don't talk about them. What about October 7th? In the Barij refugee camp, 5 members of a single family were reportedly killed in a strike on their home. How do you justify that? Striking homes? Okay. Reporter Mohammed al-Munirawi was among those killed, bringing the total number of journalists slaughtered by the Israelis to 256. These are the facts on the ground. And I just want to interject real quick to say, anyone who is under the impression that being angry with Israel over what's transpiring in Gaza, in the West Bank, and Lebanon, where there's also allegedly a ceasefire. Anyone who thinks like, oh, anyone calling this out, they're just anti-Semitic, they just hate the Jews. There are Jews who don't co-sign onto this. No problem with them. There are evangelicals and Jews who do co-sign onto this. Now, do I hate them simply because of their identity or their religious beliefs? No, I hate them because of this ideology that makes them believe that they're actually the good guys as they're slaughtering tens of thousands of children in the quest to steal more land. I'm just calling it like I see it. It has nothing to do with Jewish religion. It has nothing to do with Jewish identity. It has everything to do with the ongoing injustices and slaughter that everyone on the international stage has been witnessing for the last 2 years. And it's endless. It is absolutely endless. The entitlement of the Israelis, the absolute disregard for human life, the perpetual victimhood as they're the ones who are doing the slaughter and stealing the land. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. And more importantly, the use of the word anti-Semite or anti-Semitism, just basically taking it and destroying what that word means entirely. That word means nothing anymore. Because anyone and everyone has been called an anti-Semite at this point when they've seen the slaughter of those kids and have expressed utter disgust with the fact that it continues to happen. They're anti-Semites apparently, okay. Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the Israeli military to carry out these powerful strikes, as he referred to them, after an IDF soldier, 37-year-old Master Sergeant Yonah Ephraim Feldbaum, was killed in Rafah. So since an IDF soldier was killed, and by the way, it is unclear exactly what happened and how this individual was killed, but because one IDF soldier was killed, that means over 100 Palestinians need to be slaughtered, including 46 children. A military source said the attack took place in the southern city of Rafah on the Israeli side of the so-called Yellow Line, which demarcates IDF-controlled territory inside Gaza under the ceasefire deal. There is no ceasefire deal. There is slaughter and land theft happening right now in Gaza as we speak. Okay, for Mr. wannabe Nobel Peace Prize winner Donald Trump, he can go ahead and try to lie to the American people and everyone else on the international stage all he wants. He has not brokered a peace deal, and this isn't a ceasefire. Ceasefire means that you stop the slaughter. And that's not what the IDF has any interest in doing. That's not what the Israelis have any interest in doing. Sergeant Feldbaum was killed when one of the vehicles of an IDF engineering team that was dismantling an underground tunnel route in Rafah was hit by fire from terrorists in the area, according to the source. But Hamas says that they were not involved in the shooting and that it may have been carried out by a rogue Palestinian militant. It could have been carried out by one of the gangs that Israel admitted to funding in the Gaza Strip. And look, here's what I know for sure. There's only one thing when it comes to the death of this IDF soldier that I know without a shadow of a doubt. I don't trust the Israelis at all, at all. So until I see some actual confirmation of what happened, an independent body investigating this to clarify exactly what happened, I'm not gonna buy their narrative at all because they're known liars. That's what they do. They lie, they kill, and they steal. That is what the IDF is known for now. And that's not according to me. That's according to anyone who's been paying attention to this story. I'm just telling the truth. So they reiterated, meaning Hamas, they reiterated that they were committed to this make-believe imaginary ceasefire. There is no ceasefire, okay? The slaughter continues. And the slaughter is very much carried out by one side, where hundreds of people get killed in a single night, and then they somehow make themselves out to be the victims. It is the most, it is awe-inspiring, it really is. It really is, the lack of self-awareness, the lack of personal responsibility, the inability to see how the Israelis look like absolute monsters on the international stage right now. And we as Americans also look like monsters. Because we're the ones funding that welfare state. We're the ones funding the bombs that are being dropped on the heads of all those children, all those elderly people, all those innocent civilians. And the thing that sucks is that we have absolutely no power to stop it. Oh, this wonderful democracy that we live in, where you have two sides of the political aisle firmly up the ass of the Israeli government. Well, what a democracy. Where literally you can't vote for someone who's gonna put a stop to this. Because our politicians are either blackmailed, bribed, compromised, you get the point. There's a second reason the Israelis gave for launching the strikes. I don't really care what reasons they have. I don't take anything that comes out of the Israelis seriously at all. But to do my due diligence, why don't we hear about how it has to do with the bodies of the deceased hostages? Let's take a look.
Yeah, so overnight, Hamas transferred the remains of a body that Israel says it already partially recovered earlier in the war. And Israel calls that a major violation because they're still waiting for the bodies of 13 deceased hostages that are still in Gaza. But Israeli officials tonight are also pointing to this video that they're posting online today, which appears to show Hamas fighters removing a body in the very left corner of the screen right there, removing a body of a deceased hostage from a house so that they could bury it. You see that right there. They then, a few minutes later, move that body with a bulldozer, and then watch this. They pretend that they had just discovered it to hand it over to the Red Cross and then Israel. Israeli officials have been livid about this, with one telling me, quote, they're making a joke out of the Red Cross and us, and it's proof Hamas knows where all the deceased hostages are, and therefore proof Hamas is slow rolling their return. But again, a US official tells me Hamas actually only knows where half the bodies are. There are many deceased hostage bodies buried under the rubble in Gaza, and that while Hamas must make a good faith effort to make haste and return those bodies, Israel must exhibit, quote, patience.
Well, I mean, obviously, the only just response to that is to kill 46 children, which is what the IDF did. Hamas, on the other hand, says that it was Israel that violated the ceasefire agreement. And to be sure, they have violated the ceasefire agreement in a multitude of ways. Okay, so one of the ways is they were supposed to allow 600 humanitarian aid trucks into the strip. They have not been doing that. Wow, I'm so shocked and chagrined. That was the most predictable thing on the planet. And as we know, the killings slowed down a little bit, but they didn't stop. Nonetheless, after the deadly strikes on Gaza, Donald Trump defended Israel's decision to slaughter all those kids and all those innocent civilians, because why not? Let's take a look.
They say it was sniper fire, and it was retribution for that, and I think they have a right to do that.
Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Congresswoman, has a different take. Luckily, there are some of us who aren't unhinged lunatics who salivate at the slaughter of innocent people. She writes, Israel's military said Wednesday that the ceasefire was back on in Gaza after it killed 104 people, including 46 children, according to local health officials. 46 children. Are these not war crimes? They're war crimes when anyone else does it, but when it's the Israelis, the precious, precious Israelis, well, they're above international law. They're above needing to act like normal human beings that actually believe in humanity. They can do whatever they want. They can kill American citizens and get away with it, as they have. And after the strike that killed over 100 Gazans, Israel declared that the ceasefire is still in effect. Still in effect. Because ceasefire to the Israelis means you cease, we fire. And that's what they've been doing. Except here's this, after it was announced the restoration, what a joke, restoration of the ceasefire. The Israeli military said it carried out another airstrike in northern Gaza, targeting what it called a site where weapons were being stored for an imminent attack. Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City said it received 2 bodies from the strike. Is anyone really still in denial about what's really going on here? What would it need to be? How many people in Gaza would need to be slaughtered by the Israelis for the genocide deniers to finally accept what the reality is? That's what I'm curious about. 46 kids in a single night slaughtered by Israel's military. And you'll still have pathetic, embarrassing goons like Emily Austin running around talking about how wonderful, how democratic, how lovely Israel really is. The checks must clear real easy. But anyway, despite Trump immediately running to Bibi's defense after the initial strikes, other officials within the government, meaning the US government, made a pretty stark admission to PBS reporter Nick Shirfin. So I'm sure PBS will be privatized and purchased by one of the Ellisons soon. But before that happens, luckily we get sound bites like this.
A US official warns to me tonight they are still worried that Israel is trying to look for an excuse to, quote, level the place, as in level Gaza, restart the war. So the US is trying to prevent that, make sure the ceasefire holds.
Come on. Israel's gonna do whatever it wants. There is no ceasefire. They're still killing people. They're still stealing land. They have no intention of leaving the portion of the Gaza Strip, somewhere around 53% that they're currently occupying. There's no question about that. They want to take that land. Trump talking about how like, oh, we're not gonna let the Israelis annex the West Bank. They're annexing it right now as we speak. We're not stupid. We can think for ourselves, we can see what's happening. We ignore mainstream corporate US media, which is totally controlled by the Zionist agenda. You pay attention to actual news and what's happening on the ground there in Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon and the Middle East in general. And you see the picture pretty clearly. There's no amount of lying from the Trump administration that's going to cover up the crimes that are currently being committed and have been committed by the Israelis over the last 2 years. So with that in mind, why don't we talk a little bit about what the Israelis are actually planning? Because every now and again, some of those legacy outlets like the Wall Street Journal don't hide the ball and they just tell you the truth. And I always appreciate when that happens, it's rare. So let's get to the details. There is every indication that the Israelis intend on remaining in the Gaza Strip. Now, the so-called peace deal that President Donald Trump brokered was supposed to create a situation in which eventually the Israelis would withdraw from the Gaza Strip, but it appears that's not going to happen. Now, if you're surprised by that, then you have to be the most naive person on the planet, or maybe you haven't been paying attention to this story as closely as we have. The reality is the whole game, the whole point has been to steal that land in the first place. Benjamin Netanyahu didn't facilitate the funding of Hamas because he wanted the Palestinians to be governed by a well-funded government, okay? He funded Hamas because he planned this from the very beginning, okay? Prop up Hamas, Hamas carries out horrible atrocities on October 7th. IDF soldiers claim, testimony you can see by the way for yourselves, it's on tape, that they had stand down orders that day. Takes the IDF hours to respond to Hamas as they're committing their atrocities. Yoav Gallant eventually confesses that the Hannibal directive was deployed, meaning IDF soldiers, when they finally did respond, ended up killing their own people in an effort to prevent Hamas from taking them hostage because they didn't want Hamas to have any leverage. And then you use this as the precursor, the excuse for everything that has transpired in Gaza over the last 2 years. That is the reality of the situation. And the land theft, that'll be the final part. So the piece that I'm referring to is from the Wall Street Journal titled, "A Trip to Gaza's New Yellow Line Shows Israel is Digging In. The temporary dividing line between two foes is becoming more permanent with earthworks and plans for civilian infrastructure." Why am I not surprised? So on Tuesday, the Israeli military took journalists for the first time. Of course, they're escorting them, so journalists aren't free to report from the Gaza Strip as they would want to. They're being escorted, they're being manipulated by the IDF. But nonetheless, they were taken for the first time to see the so-called yellow line that has separated the Israeli and Hamas-controlled areas of Gaza since the ceasefire came into effect. Just a reminder that last night 104 Palestinians were slaughtered by the Israelis. That's not a ceasefire. Israel still controls over 50% of the Strip, as you can see from this map. Somewhere between 53 to 58%. I've seen conflicting reports on that, but certainly more than 50%. So all along the yellow line, Israeli forces are manning existing outposts and putting up new ones. The IDF is laying down yellow painted concrete blocks to formally mark the line, but military officials say that only around 10 to 20% of that work has been completed so far. Now Trump's, you gotta laugh, Trump's peace plan dictates that Israel is supposed to pull back farther toward Gaza's borders once the international security force is on the ground and Hamas has been disarmed. But there's no indication either of those things will happen, at least not anytime soon. And Israel really doesn't seem like they have any intention of retreating. Israeli military officials say they are preparing for the possibility the yellow line could remain their defensive position for the foreseeable future. Should Hamas continue to refuse to disarm, the US and Israel are working on a plan to begin rebuilding Gaza only in areas controlled by Israel. I mean, we've shared that information with you previously, which is part of the reason why I'm not surprised by any of this. But I want you guys to pay close attention to this whole disarm argument, because they keep saying we want Hamas to disarm, which sounds like a totally fair demand. But the reality is they want the Palestinians in general to disarm. They want them to be defenseless. And once they disarm, you have no country. Think about our country. Think about us having our military disarm. All right, well, I mean, we're just sitting ducks. Anyone that wants to invade can invade, and we have no means to defend ourselves. Considering the fact that the Palestinians, if they were to be able to finally develop their own state free of Israel's control, if they don't have a military, if they're demilitarized, who the hell believes for a single second the Israelis aren't gonna invade? Come on. Come on. This is so obvious. It's just so obvious. So they want a demilitarized Gaza. For what reason other than Israel, a nuclear power that's backed by a global military superpower? They're gonna pretend they're not demilitarized. We're gonna be victims again. Thus, we must invade and we must take the land, not just in Gaza, but also the West Bank. And then after we do that, we're probably gonna expand further. I mean, they're already occupying southern Lebanon. They have no intention of leaving, even though the ceasefire in Lebanon indicated that, yeah, the Israelis were supposed to leave southern Lebanon. They didn't do that though. And no one's even talking about it. No one seems to care. Because one side gets away with literal murder. The other side, if they sneeze too loudly, it's somehow justification to slaughter endless numbers of children. So I don't even know what else to say about this. It's just, I'm sick of the lies. I'm sick of the euphemisms. I'm sick of our media and our society pretending like the Israelis are innocent angels when over the last 2 years we have seen them engage in a level of evil that I did not think could exist anymore. It has made me reconsider religion. That's how evil this Israeli government and military is. because I want answers. How could people this evil, this disgusting, this thirsty for death and destruction exist on this planet? But they do. And we, the American people, are literally going into debt. We are borrowing money so we can send it over to them and fund the atrocities and the land theft and the empire building the Israelis are currently engaging in. That's the reality of the situation. They're also trying to spin this as a noble deed because, of course, why not? Israel is already working on building new water and electricity infrastructure on its side of the yellow line to facilitate the plan, a senior military official said. There are also plans to build new aid hubs along the yellow line. Why? So you can have some desperate Palestinians show up and you can shoot at them, slaughter them, which is what's been happening. It wasn't clear on which side of the yellow line they would be located, but they would need to serve Palestinians living on either side. The only serving they're doing to Palestinians is serving them bullets to their heads and their chests, or dropping bombs on top of their heads. Anyone who's stupid enough to think the Israelis have any interest in helping Palestinian civilians is delusional. Absolutely delusional. These are some of the most evil people I have ever witnessed, and it disgusts me that our government is in bed with them. It is what it is. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. MCM says, hi Anna, please consider doing a report on what is going on in Sudan. US is supplying weapons to UAE. I hear Trump has all these business deals with UAE. Interesting. The images of lynched children are horrifying and the mainstream media is ignoring it. Love TYT from Sydney. We'll look into that story for sure. Thank you for informing me about what's going on. Romulus 463 says 43 million on government assistance. Pro-slavery advocate George Frishew wanted to expand slavery to half the whites of USA through dependents. Though dependents would be so proud, a lot of these people should find alternatives to government assistance. I think you're talking about the government shutdown and the fact that, SNAP is a corporate subsidy. It's corporate welfare. When you have all these Americans working full-time jobs and they're still unable to make ends meet and they have to rely on public assistance, that's corporate welfare. I know that the thinking, because our media does a piss poor job in informing people about what the reality is. The thinking is, all the people who are on SNAP benefits are just, they're all lazy bums, they're not working, they just want to sit on the couch and live off other people's hard work. And look, I'm not gonna deny that some people like that certainly do exist. Is it the majority of people who are on these social programs? Not by a long shot, especially when you dig into the numbers. Anyone who is working a full-time job in this country and is not earning enough to provide food and shelter for their families, there should be an investigation into the corporations that are employing them. Anyone working 40 hours a week should be able to afford the bare necessities in this country. Chrome Chin Chiller says footage showing IDF drones monitoring Hamas staging a scene with a dead Israeli hostage. Despite clear surveillance, civilians, including children and babies, were targeted instead of the actual perpetrators. Of course, they want to ethnically cleanse every Palestinian from that land and then take it. That is what they are doing. Let's stop pretending. It's like the same thing that's happening right now with the fishing boats that are being bombed by our pathetic, belligerent government. It's all about the drug war. No, it's not. Are you dumb? Are you dumb? look, I have never vibed more with libertarians than I do right now, because at least they are realistic about what's going on. This is not a drug war. This is a regime change war, okay? Everyone who voted for Trump because they were convinced that he wouldn't start new wars, congratulations, he lied to you. Hook, line, and sinker, you bought it, he's starting a new war. We've now soured relations with freaking Colombia, a longstanding ally of the United States. What are we doing? Let's just call it as we see it. Let's stop lying about what's actually happening. Please, for the love of God, let's get back to the show. Does one cover up war crimes when international journalists will soon see the absolute devastation, destruction, and death that has been carried out by the Israeli Defense Forces in the Gaza Strip? That's what we're going to talk about now, because, well, Ynet, which is an Israeli publication, did explore this topic. Turns out the Israeli government is a little bit concerned about the public's perception of what they've carried out. And so what are they planning? What is their strategy as the Gaza Strip might soon open up to international journalists who have been, by the way, barred from reporting on the ground over the last 2 years so Israel can carry out its genocide? So let's get to the details. The Israelis are preparing for damage control as international journalists prepare to potentially enter the Gaza Strip soon. We don't know exactly when that'll happen, but it eventually will happen. And they've been restricted from reporting on the ground in the Gaza Strip over the last 2 years. Israel was under the impression that we're all morons, and if they just kill as many journalists, Palestinian journalists in the Gaza Strip, and if they bar international journalists from entering the Gaza Strip, maybe we won't know about the genocide they've been carrying out over the last 2 years. But oopsie daisy, turns out we all saw it, we all continue to see it. They just killed 104 people in Gaza overnight in the middle of a ceasefire. So what exactly are they gonna do? Oh my gosh, these international journalists, they might actually see that we are some of the most evil people on the planet. That we have leveled the Gaza Strip. We have bombed every hospital. We have bombed and destroyed every university. We've even targeted refugee camps. We've done everything we possibly could to erase the Palestinian people from the Gaza Strip while simultaneously pretending like we weren't doing that. So when the journalists show up and they see all the evidence of our wretchedness, what are we gonna do? Well, Ynet gets into that. Israeli publication, they write a piece. Israel braces for a propaganda war as global journalists prepare to enter Gaza. Israel is preparing a coordinated media strategy ahead of global journalists' arrival in Gaza, including IDF escorted tours and visual evidence to show how Hamas built terror infrastructure within civilian areas and used residents as shields. Now, when it comes to their propaganda strategy here in the United States, I mean, look no further than the likes of Emily Austin, who's so bad at making Israel look good that I would venture to say that their strategy on Gaza here probably not gonna work out so well. But let me give you the details, you can decide for yourselves. With international forces expected to enter the Strip to assist in locating the hostages and the bodies that Hamas claims are no longer in its possession, Israel is bracing for the arrival of foreign journalists who will, for the first time, see the destruction with their own eyes. Now, we've seen the destruction. It's just that the journalists will get to see the destruction close up instead of the aerial view of the complete and utter devastation that has been brought upon the Palestinian people by the hands of the Israeli government and the IDF. Israel intends to control access entirely, by the way. If you think they're just gonna, open up borders and tell international journalists, be free, go report, you're wrong, obviously. So the Foreign Press Association to the Israeli government, by the way, they took the Israeli government to the courts because of their unwillingness to allow journalists into the Strip so they could do their jobs and actually report accurately on what's happening. And in a response to that, the state told the Supreme Court that Israeli and foreign journalists will soon be permitted to enter Gaza under Israel Defense Forces escorting them up to the boundary known as the Yellow Line. Okay. Officials across Israel's public diplomacy establishment are preparing for what they describe as an oncoming wave of negative reports focusing on human stories from Gaza. God forbid we talk about the humans who were absolutely devastated and destroyed, murdered by the IDF. These stories, they say, will likely feature the suffering of civilians amid the devastation and could reignite criticism of Israel's conduct during the war. There's an inherent admission there that I particularly appreciate. This is gonna be a bit of a problem. If we allow the journalists to show up, they might see what we've done. We've done some pretty bad things. A senior official involved in the planning described the mission as a central task for every branch of the system. The challenge, he said, is clear and significant, especially because of the widespread destruction visible in Gaza. We are working to prepare explanatory materials with an emphasis on visual and incriminating evidence to illustrate that Hamas turned Gaza into a terror state. I think Israel's the terror state. I think most people who are paying attention know Israel's the terror state. They've killed tens of thousands of innocent people that we know of so far. They have leveled the Gaza Strip. They've destroyed every residential building. You have a population of nearly 2 million people who are homeless right now because of the Israelis. They spent over 2 years annihilating the Gaza Strip. And now you have members of Israel's government saying, we're not done yet, we have to destroy the tunnels. You were there for over 2 years, you didn't do anything about the tunnels? Oh yeah, you're too busy destroying people's homes and universities and hospitals. Wretched. We are working to prepare explanatory materials with an emphasis on visual and incriminating evidence to illustrate that Hamas turned Gaza into a terror state, cynically using civilians and civilian infrastructure. Man, I gotta say, these people tend to think they're very brilliant and their talking points are so tired. I am so bored. Hamas is using them as human shields. Hamas, human shields, Hamas, human shields. We're tired of it because no one's buying it anymore. It makes no sense. One foreign ministry source said that we expect intensified anti-Israel attacks on social media and in traditional media outlets. What's amazing about the Israelis is that they want two things to happen simultaneously, okay? They want to carry out war crimes, kill innocent civilians, destroy their homes, level their territory entirely. They want to literally rape Palestinian prisoners on camera, by the way. And then if there might be some consequences for the Israeli prison guards who were caught on camera raping Palestinian prisoners, then you'll have Israeli civilians protesting the possibility of punishment for those prison guards. Okay, so all of those things happen, and what the Israelis feel entitled to is for us to support them and not say anything negative about them. I don't comply. This is wretched, it's disgusting. There is no amount of hasbara and there's no amount of lies coming from this disgusting Israeli government that's going to somehow sanitize the war crimes and destruction that we've all witnessed with our own 2 eyes over the last 2 years. They're totally delusional. So in an effort to mitigate the negative reports that reveal the Israelis for the genocidal scumbags they really are, The government is planning the establishment of designated sites in Gaza where journalists can be shown how Hamas operated from within civilian areas, of course. Officials say that if the plan is approved, several demonstration sites will be created to provide clear visual explanations. One senior Israeli official told Ynet, the journalists will show the ruins and point to Israel as responsible. Get a load of this though. But Israel's message is unequivocal. Hamas bears the responsibility. We never do anything wrong. We are innocent angels. We kill tens of thousands of children and think we're the good guys. Unequivocal. Man, this is consistent with international law, even if it doesn't look good on camera. Well, that's a senior Israeli official who didn't want to identify themselves. If everything that's being done is compliant with international law, why are you giving an anonymous statement? Shouldn't you be proud of the conduct that's been carried out, senior Israeli official? And another senior official laughably claimed that it was Hamas, not the IDF, that leveled Gaza. We need to make clear that this was a terror state. For 20 years, Hamas built terror infrastructure on top of civilian infrastructure. It exploited schools, mosques, and basically everything that Israel bombed to smithereens in order to make way for Israeli settlements. They're gonna blame on Hamas. We already know the storyline. What's funny is that they think it's gonna work. It's not gonna work because we're not morons. You're either an Israel defender, you're like Brianna Wu, who like, oh my God, she like swallows that Hasbara nonsense day in and day out. She's so proud of herself for doing it. She's an embarrassment. I am embarrassed that we were ever associated with her in any way, shape, or form. Oh God, get off X, man. What an embarrassment you are. People like that, sure, they'll swallow the Hasbara proudly. But for anyone who has two brain cells to rub together, they're either living in reality, but too terrified to speak about it because they see how the Israelis act once anyone pushes back against their war crimes, or they're openly condemning the Israelis like we are here at TYT. Unafraid, day in, day out, we see the war crimes. Your little propaganda trips, your little manipulation strategies for journalists aren't gonna work for people who actually care about the truth. And the truth is, these are among the worst atrocities I have witnessed in my lifetime. And they're not gonna stop, they're gonna continue. They're not gonna stop with Gaza, they're not gonna stop with the West Bank. They're currently bombing southern Lebanon and occupying southern Lebanon. Tell me if the Lebanese government is ready to disarm Hezbollah. Because disarming Hezbollah means that the Lebanese will be safe. Their sovereignty won't be. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, some more moments from the Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes conversation that we didn't have time to get to yesterday. Some people are really upset that they had a conversation. We'll get into that and more when we come back. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our social break. Graham Plattner, who is running for a Senate seat in Maine, will be interviewed by Cenk Uygur tonight after the main show. So that'll be at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you tune into that. Let's get to some of your comments. Splurt Records, who's been a member for 3 months, says, thanks for all your hard work, Anna. You're like an idol, punk rock as. So freaking well-spoken and awesome hair to top it off. Thank you. I don't feel well-spoken today, and I don't know. This job is very hard. I'll just leave it there. Marcel Lambert says, I'm sick of the lies too. Thank you, TYT, for being the voice of righteousness. There was that moment where Donald Trump said, I'm probably not gonna make it to heaven. I don't know if he actually believes in heaven and hell. I don't know if he's a religious person at all. But if there is an afterlife, he's definitely not ending up in heaven. Unfinished project. Hi, Anna, did you read the Guardian piece on the Nimbus project? The evidence of Israel's criminality and unallyship to the US is everywhere and no one does anything. It's insane. Well, yeah, our politicians, again, are either blackmailed or bribed by the Israelis. What happened to the Epstein files again? Robert Maxwell published our social studies and history books, guys. Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, published the textbooks that I read in public school. I used to think conservatives were nuts to want to homeschool their kids. Homeschool your kids if you can. If I ain't no way I'm gonna leave their education up to a government, honestly, that's in the pocket of a genocidal regime in the Middle East. I can't believe Robert Maxwell published our history books. That's why I have no malice in my heart toward Americans who are on the wrong side of this issue. And I'm talking about ordinary Americans, I'm not talking about these government officials. Because we've all been propagandized on this. Do you know how many atrocities, how many genocides, how many ethnic cleansings there have been on this globe? It is interesting that we only focused on one through our education. Anyway. Bach says it's corporate welfare twice. And by the way, let me just say one other thing. I am the product of a people who suffered a genocide. I am proud of the Armenian people for not using the genocide as an excuse to terrorize and slaughter other innocent people. I'll just leave it there. Rose Turner says it looks like Israel has been around long enough to become the villain. The oppressed have become the oppressors, definitely, 100%. Hurt people, I guess. But they think they're the good guys. It's insane.
I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well.
Hello.
All right, Chrome Chinchilla says, let's agree on the fact that the US acts on behalf of Israel as real culprits, manufacturing enemies across the Middle East without any justification, just to sow chaos globally. I have so much to say about this. Then they slap terrorists on Muslim countries or communities. It's deliberate destabilization disguised as defense. The US is now buddy-buddy with an Al-Qaeda terrorist who's leading Syria. 9/11 destroyed this country. It wasn't just the horrific terror attack that ended up killing thousands of Americans. That was bad enough. But everything that came after that, this country changed forever. There are people now, young Americans who never knew a country before 9/11. I was in high school, so at least I knew what this country was like prior to 9/11. Al-Qaeda carried out that terror attack. And the US indirectly provided weapons to Al-Qaeda in an effort to get rid of Bashar al-Assad because Bashar al-Assad wasn't deferential to Israel. And so as soon as Bashar al-Assad falls, well, that power vacuum exists, right? Who fills it? Al-Qaeda. We had an Al-Qaeda terrorist on US soil this year for the UN General Assembly. How are people not furious about that? Let's get to the next story.
I tweeted to Ben Shapiro. I said, I've never seen anything on the Daily Wire that's actually critical of Israel. And he quote tweets me. And at this time, I have 1,000 followers on Twitter. I don't know. I probably got 100 likes on this tweet. It wasn't a viral tweet. He quote tweets me and says, "To accuse a Jew of dual loyalty is the surest sign of anti-Semitism."
But the second you're like, well, actually, it's the Jews. First of all, it's against my Christian faith. Like, I just don't believe that, and I never will, period. And second, then it becomes a way to discredit. That's when I was like, this guy's a Fed.
Well, as you just saw from that video, Tucker Carlson had a sit-down interview with Nick Fuentes, who's obviously a very controversial figure. And I was happy to see that they had a back and forth about their differences on how they discuss Israel and what's being carried out in Gaza. I am certainly more in agreement with Tucker Carlson. I do not blame the Jews, but I do blame a certain ideology and a certain government that has carried out the atrocities that we've seen in the Middle East, not just during this genocide in Gaza, but over the last several decades. That you have Nick Fuentes and he thinks that there's an organized Jewry that is essentially leading to the situation that we're seeing right now on the ground in Gaza. Again, I agree more with Tucker Carlson. I'm just recounting that part of the discussion in case you missed our coverage of it, because we talked about that yesterday. But there were other parts of their conversation that I thought were worthy of delving into. I wanted to share with you, including this really interesting experience that Nick Fuentes allegedly had with the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro. So this is all taking place when Nick Fuentes is still in high school. He's like around 18 years old. He's a curious person, he's a self-identified libertarian. He debates someone, and apparently that debate he performed really well in. And then he gets approached by someone who I'm actually familiar with. Her name is Cassie Dillon, who works over at the Daily Wire. She was impressed, and then there was like this effort to essentially recruit Nick Fuentes. Now, there's more to the story, and I wanna let Fuentes set it up for you, so let's take a look.
Barack Obama in the lame duck period, so the Democrats lost the election, he's on his way out. There's a resolution of the Security Council condemning the settlements in the West Bank in Israel. And typically, the US delegation will veto those resolutions condemning Israel. From the rest. And Fox News and all the pro-Israel conservatives are calling him an anti-Semite. They're saying he hates Jews, he's an anti-Semite, he hates Israel. I said, how is it anti-Semitic to just be consistent on our US foreign policy? I tweeted about it. I tweeted to Benj Shapiro. I said, I've never seen anything on the Daily Wire that's actually critical of Israel. And he quote tweets me. And at this time, I have 1,000 followers on Twitter. I don't know, I probably got 100 likes on this tweet. It wasn't a viral tweet. He quote tweets me and says, "To accuse a Jew of dual loyalty is the surest sign of anti-Semitism."
How is that? First of all, dual loyalty exists. I said it exists. There are Americans in this country right now, self-identified American Jews, who seem to be far more concerned with the well-being of a foreign country, and that foreign country is Israel, as opposed to the well-being of this country. Ben Shapiro is a fiscal conservative who's very concerned about our entitlement programs like Social Security, programs that we pay into as Americans, so we can maybe one day retire and not be destitute. He thinks that we spend too much money on that program and healthcare and all that. But when it comes to bribing Egypt to play nice with Israel, money well spent. $4 billion a year to Israel, money well spent. $30 billion since October 7th to help Israel commit its atrocities in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, money well spent. Our tax dollars working for us, the American people, what a waste. We're in debt, we're in debt. I'm not gonna believe a single politician or pundit in this country, left or right, when they say they are concerned about our debt as they just funnel more and more of our resources to a foreign country. Dual loyalty? exists, and that's not anti-Semitism. It's a fact and it's reality. Never thought I would see the day where I would, I guess, defend Nick Fuentes over the ridiculous smears of Ben Shapiro. You know, Israel effed up big time by carrying out what they've been carrying out over the last 2 years. Because for the first time in my lifetime, I'm seeing Americans ask questions and actually effectively push back against these talking points that had silenced people previously. But there is evidence of dual loyalty, and there's nothing anti-Semitic to call it out. Now let's watch Fuentes explain how he actually used to have a very good relationship with the folks over at the Daily Wire, and then he started asking what they referred to as the wrong questions.
I was friends with a lot of the Daily Wire writers, not just Cassie Dillon, but many of them were Jewish. And I would ask them point blank, I would say, so why do we give Israel all this money? $3.8 billion per year? What is that for? And they would say, well, you know, there's a really good answer for that, but you're asking it in the wrong way. You're asking it in an anti-Semitic way. I'd say I'm asking for the proof. You know, what's the argument there? And so first it was the sort of, hey man, could you kind of tone it down? Maybe just don't bring that up so much. But I was persistent because at this time I was genuinely inquisitive. I wanted to know, is there an actual reason? And I was actually expecting that there was a really good reason for all of it. And the more that I read, the more that I dug into the subject, the more I found out there's a lot of these neocon Jewish types behind the Iraq war. There's the foreign aid complex, which is really unique. There's AIPAC, which is this intense foreign lobby where it's bipartisan. It seems to be the only thing that the parties can agree on. And so it just made me burn more with curiosity. So I just kept asking them. And eventually they said, you know what? We're not going to talk to you anymore.
Oh, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to ask those questions. Okay, this is a side note, and I know it's going to take away from the commentary a little bit, but you got the sniffles, bro. You got to do something about the sniffles. Okay, it was really distracting, but putting that aside, no, he was asking the right questions. In fact, I wish more Americans asked those questions. And it's sus. What's wrong with asking $1 every year? And then of course, there's always like supplemental funding that pops up out of nowhere. Like the random $1 billion in extra funding that AOC allegedly didn't want to vote in favor of. Then she voted present and then cried on the House floor and embarrassed progressives in this country with how pathetic she is. Sorry, I know that's a harsh thing to say. I'm supposed to be very rah-rah about the progressives in Congress, except when push comes to shove, they do a lot of unprogressive things, like provide Israel with an additional $1 billion in funding when we're already giving them $4 billion a year in military aid. He didn't ask the wrong questions. The problem is he asked the right questions in the wrong environment, in an environment where the dual loyalty certainly does exist. And no one's gonna stop me from saying that because it's the truth. It's the truth. Let's pivot to a more amusing part of the discussion because Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes had a bit of a tiff earlier this year. They both accused each other of being feds. It was hilarious. And look, Tucker Carlson also said that, you know, Nick Fuentes is like a gay kid living in his parents' basement, whatever. And so that really upset Nick Fuentes. He did a whole broadcast about it. It blew up and everyone was like waiting for this moment where they would, you know, hash it out. And they did. So Carlson repeatedly urged Fuentes to let go of his grudges against his perceived enemies. And that led to the two of them basically focusing on their recent feud. So let's watch the clip and then we'll explain the backstory a little more.
Look, Tucker, that's why I'm sitting here, you know?
Right.
I mean, because we had a contentious dialogue.
Well, I thought you were a Fed. I
thought you were a Fed.
I was a Fed.
Yeah.
I'm not a Fed. But whatever, I don't care what people think.
We showed each other a badge as we know we're all.
No, but I thought you were a Fed because I was like, why not? It's not cucking to say, you're not talking about all Jews when you oppose a foreign policy position. It's not. There's nothing liberal about that. It's just true. That's the Christian position, okay? And two, why are you attacking like the best people and not the worst people?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, he disavowed me for my views on Israel and said I talk too much about white people and Christianity. And to me, that's like a sincere ideological disagreement.
I get it.
Okay, so the guy that they're talking about is Joe Kent. That's who they were feuding about. So he's a Republican who ran for the House in Washington. In Washington's 2022 and 2024 elections. He did lose both times. And according to Fuentes, many years ago, Fuentes privately gave Kent the support of both himself and his organization's political resources on the condition that Kent would never publicly disavow Fuentes, which I think is a ridiculous ask. You never know what the future holds. What if Fuentes does something terrible? I think Kent should be allowed to disavow him, right? But later, Kent did just that after Marjorie Greene attended Fuentes' conference back in 2022. Okay, look, I don't care about any of this stuff. Like, here's what I do care about. The reason why Tucker thought that Nick Fuentes was a Fed is because when you have critics of Israel specifically blaming the Jews and spewing anti-Semitic rhetoric, those of us who don't think it's the Jews and instead specifically blame a government and those who adhere to a certain ideology, we get lumped in with the likes of Nick Fuentes or whoever says disgusting anti-Semitic things about Jews, and that discredits us. And so many think that figures like that are feds meant to intentionally discredit those who have legitimate criticism about Israel. So that's why Tucker Carlson thought he was a Fed. Now, is he a Fed? No, I don't think he's a Fed. I think he's I think he got his start very young. I think he's on the record saying a lot of terrible things. I think he's trying to be or was trying to be some sort of edgelord. And in a lot of ways that destroyed his reputation. When in reality, if he didn't feed into that gross, hateful rhetoric, and not just about Jews, about women, about all sorts of people, he's actually not a dumb guy. He makes cogent arguments. He seems to be well read. And he would be far more influential if he didn't cave into or give into that rhetoric. Now it's gonna haunt him for the rest of his life. And this is why, look, if you have kids, they're teenagers, they're online, just sit down and talk to them about, hey, everything you say will exist forever. And it will haunt you for the rest of your life. So yeah, look, people are upset that Tucker Carlson had a sit-down interview with Nick Fuentes because of the statements he has made on the record. I don't think anyone should dictate who anyone should or shouldn't be allowed to talk to, but I also understand where the rage and fury is coming from because Nick Fuentes has definitely offended a lot of people by saying some pretty disgusting things. I think people can be redeemed, but there needs to be an apology. There needs to be an acknowledgement. Hey, I was a moron, I grew, I changed, I matured. I personally haven't seen that. But I do think that having these types of conversations are still worth it because we get a little bit of insight into not only who Fuentes is, but the experiences he had with conservative organizations trying to groom him for their own purposes, and then rejecting him and attempting to bury him the second he asks questions that they deem to be inappropriate, which actually happen to be very appropriate. So I don't know what to make about Nick Fuentes. What I do know is, regardless of how much you want him to go away, he's not going away. This guy had 300,000 people watching one of his live streams recently. He's blowing up. And if you want to know why he's blowing up, look no further than our government's fealty to a foreign government that's currently carrying out atrocities with our resources. If you think my commentary about what Israel has been up to in the Middle East is what is leading to anti-Semitism in the country, how about maybe consider the actions of the Israeli government? Because believe it or not, people around the world do not rejoice in the endless imagery of children with their limbs blown off, or parents picking up their children's body parts and putting them in plastic bags in Gaza. People see that and they get angry. Anyway, I'm in a mood. We're gonna take a break. Cenk Uygur will be with us in just a few minutes.
What contributions to the progressive cause are you most proud of? I mean, I don't have super high aspirations for a singular role that I can play in the movement or anything. I try to present myself as what I think that I am, which is a progressive man who is driven by I think, well-interrogated and well-organized system of values that I try to stay consistent on, and I demonstrate that that's the sort of life that a person can lead and be successful and be happy and all of that. And that should not need to be done, but there are so many people on the right that are trying to push men in the opposite direction that I want to be able to do that. Along the way, if I can get people to care about some topics that they wouldn't necessarily care about, or that for some men they might think that's not a topic that they should be focused on, that's definitely something that I relish doing. And along the way, I mean, we've been able to introduce people to a lot of candidates. That's been a big part of what we've done. Not all of them necessarily got in office. Probably most of them did not. And a lot of them you might not even remember their names. But it was great to be able to provide people the platform where they had the chance of making a difference. Obviously AOC and all that, but there's been a lot of great people along the way.
In the bonus episode for the members, we do some inside baseball. We're gonna look at John's desk. Nice little spaceship here. Nerd. But it is kind of look cool. Who has Legos? Oh no. He's taken apart a keyboard. Who has a mouse pad that's this big? He's got a dog with a nose that you could hang something on. You know what this desk screams to me? Nerd. And that's how we like him. We love Johnny Pie. He's got his own personality like everybody does at TYT. Come meet us all in the bonus episodes. TYT.com/team.
David Sorrell, Nina Turner.
Adam Green drop by.
Charlemagne.
Congressman, great to have you. It's great to be with you, Cenk.
Your show is a great thing. You're informing people. A lot of the shows that I live on, my CNN, my MSNBC, and even Fox, and any of the other shows, NPR, they are so quick to decide that they know what this building means today.
The one thing that I hate that politicians do, they talk about the people they should be talking to.
Do they have any idea that they're the establishment and that they're hated? Or do they not realize that at all?
People are so deeply in their little universe. I think it's very easy to not really question what you're doing.
Voters have a right to ask questions of any nominee, whether they're independent, Republican, or Democrat.
The system is duopoly that suppresses competition.
How is it the year 2024 and we're still like, maybe they'll talk about paid medical?
Like,
how is that like at one level it's like, this is what we're talking about now. You're like, it's 2024.
And that's always been the critique, your critique of us is, well, you guys give good speeches, you put out good tweets, but you're not wielding actual power. Now we're starting to.
My favorite news platform by far. It's not even close.
It's about a country and a principle, and that's what you and I both work to achieve, and I'm so glad that at least half the battle has now been won.
If you want to go really hear what's going on, honestly, you should tune into the Young Turks.
Thanks for doing such a great job. Please keep it up. Hang tough.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Oh, I like making you happy.
I didn't know about that.
This is a happy Anna-Kasparian. You're welcome, YouTube.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real, positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
All right, so you got a message for John Idarola?
Tell him to be nice to me.
Okay, that's a tough ask. right, back on TYT. Cenk, Anna, Cole Muth, Max J, Lewis Aller. All of you guys, thank you for joining. It makes a big difference to us and we appreciate it. If you can, either hit the join button or tyt.com/join. All right, guys, we do have an interview coming up at 8 o'clock Eastern with Graham Plattner, and that ought to be very interesting. We'll ask him about the tattoo, past statements, etc. But we'll also ask him about the race overall, and then interview with David Hogg after that. So a lot of super interesting interviews coming up later today. And yes, I was on Piers Morgan this morning, and I got a chance. I was surprised. I didn't know he was going to do this. He had me go one-on-one against Randy Fine. Loved it. Couldn't get enough of it. We'll put it up on tyt.com/press the minute it's up.
Did you fry him like bacon?
Well, I'll let folks be the judge of that. All right.
All right, let's get to the next story. A 67-year-old US citizen was left with multiple broken ribs and internal bleeding after ICE agents dragged him out of his car and forced him to the ground during an immigrant suite in Chicago's Old Irving Park neighborhood. Again, I just targeting 7-year-old American citizen.
Yeah, look, they. No, I don't think so. We'll find out. Did they have any identification? We'll find out. Was there anything legitimate in this? We'll find out.
Before I give you more details on this incident, I just want to remind you all that, or maybe you haven't even heard about this, but the Trump administration is displeased with ICE. Why are they displeased? Well, they have implemented a 3,000 arrest a day quota. And they feel that ICE isn't being aggressive enough, even though their tactics haven't just, essentially traumatized and terrorized people. It's also happened to American citizens. Congratulations, America. So the violent debacle played out in front of children gathered for the neighborhood's annual Halloween parade, and according to DW Running Club, the man who has yet to be identified is one of their athletes who was actually on his way home from a run. Sounds dangerous. One of our athletes was on his way home from a team long run yesterday, and as he turned onto his block, found that border control had the road blocked. The agents threatened to break his window if he didn't move his car. Before he could act, they pulled him out of his car, knelt on his back and subdued him, though he never resisted. I mean, we witnessed ICE agents do that to a local reporter in Chicago as well. That was a video that we showed you a few weeks ago. Before he could act, they pulled him out of his car, knelt on his back, and subdued him, though he never resisted. They broke 6 of his ribs and caused internal bleeding. Remember, we're talking about a 67-year-old. He's a runner, doesn't mean he's a weightlifter. And ICE agents decided to treat him this way because, I mean, who's gonna stop them, right, Cenk? I mean, these guys are totally out of control. Whether you're an American citizen or not, they don't care. A few weeks ago, we also shared that story of a US veteran who got detained for days after a raid happened on a marijuana farm in California. And he was like, I'm an American citizen, I'm a veteran. So we got to detain him for several days.
The 2 things that I'm most concerned about is, one, they're starting to treat American citizens as collateral damage. So, I talk about the Israelification of our policies. This is partly what I mean. Like, well, we had to go get the undocumented immigrant that's been here for 10, 20 years working on a construction job. So we heard a bunch of Americans on our way because, hey, they're collateral damage. Bad guys, you're allowed to do anything you want involved, including American citizens. Disturbing. You might want to get them out of the country, etc. But this is not the way to do it. They're not bad people, okay? Some of you won't believe. The other thing I'm concerned about is
showing the agents using tear gas and tackling people for arrest, and that includes American citizens. In one video confirmed by ABC News, resident Carlos Rodriguez is heard yelling at agents, "You're scaring our children to death." Again, they were gathered for Halloween festivities, and these kids are witnessing what our government's all about.
These days, yeah.
Yeah. One man, Carlos Rodriguez, also told the Chicago Tribune that upward of 25 kids and their families were present trying to enjoy a block party. Big mistake. They're terrorized right now. How do you explain that to a child? And according to the Department of Homeland Security spokesperson, Tricia McLaughlin, agents were, they were just deploying crowd control measures to protect themselves from all those dangerous children celebrating during the block party. Let me give you their actual statement. During the operations, Border Patrol agents were surrounded by a group of agitators. Federal law enforcement issued multiple lawful commands and verbal warnings, all of which were ignored. 2 US citizens were arrested for assaulting and impeding a federal officer to safely clear the area after multiple warnings and the crowd continuing to advance on them. Border Patrol had to deploy crowd control measures. They're also known to lie. So for instance, the local news reporter who was thrown to the ground and violently arrested by ICE agents a few weeks ago, they claimed that she had thrown objects at the ICE agents. Later, they let her go without any charges because she hadn't done anything wrong. She was like a middle-aged local news reporter. Okay, she wasn't some activist, she wasn't part of Antifa, she was there doing her job and she got brutalized by ICE. It's insane. Now, I'd love to know exactly how ICE is protecting the children as they do this. This was actually a discussion that we had on CNN recently. Let's take a look.
I mean, the big question is, will this push them toward tactics that are,
I mean, we're already
illegal in some cases.
Listen, we're already seeing the tactics being used. I mean, we see the images on the streets all the time. You actually see these agents surround people who are brown and simply ask them, what country were you born in?
ICE has just been given tens of billions of additional taxpayer dollars in order to expand their operations. First of all, I don't know where the 3,000 number comes from. It seems pretty arbitrary. I don't know why they set that goal. But we already know that ICE's tactics in an effort to engage in this mass deportation has led to American citizens getting detained, sometimes for days on end, begging the authorities to consider the fact that they're actually American citizens. I'm worried about these actions infringing on the rights of American citizens. It's one thing to want to deport people who are here illegally. It's another thing to deploy the types of tactics that we've already seen. And I'm worried that with this latest news, they're going to expand that and harm even more people.
In Chicago.
So ProPublica actually investigated this because I hadn't seen reporting that gave you a full picture of how many American citizens have been victimized by ICE's more aggressive tactics. And what they found was that there have been more than 170 incidents involving Americans who were detained by ICE agents. This was just in the first 9 months of Trump's second term.
Yeah, so it's much worse in Chicago than other places. So if you live in another place, you might be wondering what's going on. ICE has swarmed Chicago. I think it's partly because Trump wanted to send in troops but couldn't. So he's like, oh yeah, then I'll send ICE to terrorize you, because he can legally send in ICE. That's not the issue, okay? So the fact that they come in with no badges, no names, no identification has already led to several rapes of women with people pretending to be ICE agents. I can't stand it. It's deeply un-American. It's exactly what a totalitarian, tyrannical government would do. And the 3,000 number, well, if you multiply it out by the number of days in a year, it comes out to right around 1 million people deported. So they're probably trying to hit that in an arbitrary way. So look, the part that to me is, I guess, debatable, and I think it's about 80-20 in the country, but I'm happy to see polling that shows otherwise, is should we deport over 10 million people in the country that are, yes, came here without documentation, but we'd have to go get them from their homes and their places of work where they haven't committed any crimes. The criminals are already gone. Everybody agrees to that. So you can't use that as an excuse, right? Should we uproot these people that have been here for forever and in this vicious kind of way with the collateral damage to American citizens, et cetera, and the terrorizing of our children in different ways, or should we not? I think 80% of the country says, no, don't do that. Is there about 20, maybe 25% who say, yeah, I love it, I can't get enough of it?
I don't know what the numbers are, Cenk, but let's go to the other side of this issue, right? Because I don't agree with what ICE is doing, okay? They're traumatizing communities, they are detaining American citizens, they're brutalizing American citizens. I don't want them brutalizing anyone, by the way, to be clear. I get that people are here illegally. I get that there's a significant portion of this country that wants to do something about it. It doesn't mean that we have to be vicious, violent bullies and brutalize people in the process of doing this. I think there's a way to do this where, I don't know, you're a little more humane than what we've been witnessing ICE do in these blue cities. But the reason why Trump is sending ICE specifically to these areas is because of some of the statements and some of the actions taken by local politicians in these areas. So I'll give you an example that actually really infuriated me. The San Francisco Board of Supervisors voted on whether or not they should work with ICE to deport undocumented immigrants who are trafficking fentanyl in this country. My answer is hell yes, every single one of them. Bye-bye, I don't want to see you, you don't belong here. You're trafficking fentanyl. Fentanyl's killing close to 100,000 Americans every year in this country. Bye. Only two members of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors said that, yeah, I should be able to deport them.
Out of how many?
I forget how many, I think around 9 if I'm not mistaken, okay. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I got you.
Or don't quote me on that.
Yeah, and so what do the other folks on the board say? We should keep them here? Well, I mean, like, what's the counter argument?
Their argument basically, look, for them, Trump is the nucleus of everything in this country, okay? Of their politics, of their political identity. And when you center Trump as like the, I guess the motivation for all of your political beliefs and values, you're gonna mess up because guess what? There are areas in which Trump is right. If you have people here illegally committing crimes that are getting people killed, they should be deported. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But since they want to resist Trump and their whole political identity is resist Trump, yeah, they'll even resist Trump when it doesn't even make sense to do so.
Yeah, I mean, resisting Trump on 90% of stuff is logical, and I get it if that's your gut reaction, but especially if you're on a board of supervisors or any kind of elected capacity, you've got to then pause and check your instinct and see if it's right. So Trump has done a lot of terrible things about Israel and Gaza, but when he had Israel turn their fighters around and not bomb Iran again, well, that was a good thing, right? I mean, we shouldn't have bombed Iran in the first place, but saying, no, I wish Trump hadn't done that, I wish he'd authorized Israel to continue bombing Iran, makes no sense, right? So obviously you have to check, wait, what did Trump say? And in this case, I think they're fighting windmills, because I don't think if you poll the people in San Francisco, as progressive as that city is, I don't think you'll get a very high percentage of people who go, oh, a guy's selling fentanyl and he's undocumented. Oh my, let's protect him because Trump wants to deport him. I don't think so. I think that's the Board of Supervisors. I don't think that's the citizens at all. No, if you come here and you've been here, even though you're undocumented, illegal, whatever, but you've been following the law and you're part of our community, we got to protect you, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the great majority of Americans, right? But if you're going around breaking the law, selling drugs, selling fentanyl that kills people, of course you got to go. Where's the question?
11, there's 11 members of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, no, you don't get to come here, break laws, and say you have a right to stay. You literally don't have a right to stay, no.
It's crazy. Anyway, all right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we've got a lot more to get to, including Mike Johnson versus Marjorie Taylor Greene. Come right back.
So let's go to TYT.com for a sec. Giants are food for us. It writes in, I'm sorry, Anna, but the dual loyalty does not exist. They are only loyal to Israel, and when it is not inconvenient, they will also support the US.
Yeah, I actually think that's true. Yeah. I think dual loyalty is overly generous.
Yeah, and guys, as we always try to be as clear as possible, is that for all Jewish Americans? Not even close, no way, right? So many Jewish Americans, or the plurality of them, are voting for Mamdani as an example, right? You know, so many folks at TYT are Jewish, or by a guy of Jewish family. No, they're not dual loyalty to Israel. But is Miriam Adelson have dual loyalty to Israel? No, you're right, not dual. She cares 98% about Israel, maybe 2% about America. I'd put Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin in that category as well, and it's not even that close.
Yep.
Right? I mean, they're absolutely obsessed with their beloved Israel and barely care about the American citizens. Carlos Urbina said, hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here. I'm not from the US, but I've been a follower and supporter of TYT for quite some time. TYT has been a true inspiration for me as a Honduran. Even though I don't live in the US and don't plan to, I deeply recognize it is a great country, okay? Especially because of the amazing Americans like you and your audience. Thank you for spreading positivity that reaches far beyond the US borders. I truly admire Cenk, Anna, and all the TYT hosts for their courage and honesty in speaking the truth and for standing up for the most vulnerable. Carlos, you're a beautiful person. I appreciate you so much. And what I love most of all there is the shout out to our audience. Because we don't exist without the audience. So all we are at our best is a voice for you guys. We try not to screw that up. We appreciate it every time that you say that we are and you support us. And by the way, Carlos is a member. So brother, you make this happen. So thank you right back at you. Okay, let's go to Super Chat. Roses Turner said, to everyone on the production team in TYT, thank you for all the hard work you do and endure daily. History will remember all of you fondly, respectfully, / personally, praying for you all mental health. Thank you, Rose, I appreciate it. I especially appreciate the shout out to everyone behind the scenes because they work so hard trying to get you guys the real news, and I appreciate it. Chrome Chinchilla writes in, we should call all out, this is their opinion, not mine. We should call out all Israeli lobbyists such as AIPAC as NPAC, referring to swastika sign PAC. And if Ben Netanyahu and his entire government alongside INF, Israeli and forces, it's time to label them as Joseph Stalin. It's rumored that Pakistan and Azerbaijan are prepping for retaliation. I would be shocked if Pakistan and Azerbaijan did anything to Israel. That sounds crazy.
I don't think, especially not Azerbaijan. Are you kidding me? Azerbaijan loves Israel.
Yeah.
They get their weapons from Israel.
So look, I refer to IDF as SS soldiers on Piers Morgan today. And I said it's because they're doing a genocide. And I said you could call them Ottomans too, but it's definitely a genocide. And so we had a debate over that, but I wouldn't go in the Nazi direction, but anyway.
I need it, let's go!
All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and these other wonderful folks, Jorge Emilio Martinez Villardago. That's awesome, appreciate it. So look guys, I was just answering a super chat during the break, and I said I wouldn't go in the Nazi direction in terms of comparing Israel, but I honestly have a couple of times. And I've called them a Gestapo, etc. I'm just comparing genocides, that's all. I think the Holocaust was worse. I don't know that it matters if a genocide is better or worse, right? But yeah, I'm deeply disturbed, and when I see the disinformation that the pro-Israeli forces are doing, it does feel like Goebbels, and so and they do massive propaganda, and their propaganda is very similar to the Ottoman propaganda, the Serb propaganda, and every other genocide I've ever studied. So you should just know that as context. I want to try to keep it more civil, but God, they push us to the edge, and when they say you must pay for our genocide and you must do X, Y, and Z. No, then I can't help myself and say, look guys, you're doing things that are similar to the worst people in the history of the world. No, you don't get to boss us around anymore.
I am so past civility, it's not even funny. But all right, let's move on to the next story.
Yeah.
It's day 29 of the federal government shutdown, where our congressional lawmakers who are still earning their checks are proving to us once again that they're pretty much useless. Marjorie Taylor Greene, though, is fighting back. Turns out some of our lawmakers actually are looking out for what's in the best interests of the American people. So Marjorie Taylor Greene is still on the warpath against her own party for attempting to do away with healthcare subsidies, to the point where healthcare premiums are now set to double without said subsidies. And she's furious that there's no backup plan by the Republican Party to help Americans with rising healthcare costs. Yesterday, reporter Jake Sherman tweeted the following, or posted the following. On the House Republican conference call, Marjorie Taylor Greene just said that she is tired of people listening to the White House political staff. MTG said that Thune, meaning Senate Majority Leader Thune, needs to use the nuclear option and reopen the government. In other words, abolish the filibuster and pass a funding bill. Now, Greene did respond to that, but before we do, Cenk, you have strong thoughts on the nuclear option. Do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene on every part of what she's saying in this particular message, including getting rid of the filibuster. But wait, Cenk, that would leave us defenseless for them passing this continuing resolution without us being able to get them to stop on doubling the premiums, right? Okay, yeah, that's because they won the election. And by the way, if they do that, then it's on them. And then the American people see they gave all the money to the rich in their tax cuts, and then they took money away from you and doubled your premiums, and then you win back Congress, etc. But this whole idea that the majority should not rule makes no sense, whether it's a Democrat or Republican in charge.
So she responded to Jake Sherman's post by saying, "You left out that I said I have no respect for the House not being in session, passing our bills and the president's executive orders. And I demanded to know from Speaker Johnson what the Republican plan for healthcare is to build the off-ramp off Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act tax credits to make health insurance affordable for Americans," meaning, like, where's the Republican plan on healthcare? That's what she wants to know. Johnson said he's got ideas and pages of policy ideas, and committees of jurisdiction are working on it, but he refused to give me one policy proposal to our GOP conference on our own conference call. Apparently, I have to go into a SCIF to find out the Republican healthcare plan. I don't know what an SCIF.
It's a SCIF. A SCIF is where you see top secret information.
Got it.
That's why Trump was in so much trouble, because he took stuff that should have been in a SCIF that you can't even leave the SCIF with, and he took it to Mar-a-Lago and put it in the bathroom.
He did nothing wrong. Those documents were in good hands. All right, anyway, Greene was still going hard this morning, by the way. She wrote, "Is it too much for me to ask what is my party's plan to build the off-ramp off of Obamacare onto price transparency, a competitive market, and affordable high-quality care? November 1st is Saturday, starting open enrollment with already high premiums skyrocketing. It's been 15 years. I gotta give her a lot of credit for saying out loud what we all have been saying about the Republican Party as it pertains to their reaction and efforts in dismantling the Affordable Care Act. Okay, you guys got a policy that's better, let us see it. Remember, repeal and replace, repeal and replace. What are you gonna repeal and replace it with? They never had a plan. They didn't even have concepts of a plan. Okay, let's just keep it real. Because they don't care about us, guys. They don't care about us. They're good, they're receiving the best healthcare in the world through their congressional benefits, but us, who cares? Who cares? Greene also spotlighted this stunning post from a self-employed father of 6. So just to give you a sense of how much American families are paying for healthcare, there are 9 options for health insurance in my zip code. Here are 3 silver plans. One of them will cost the family $3,655 a month. The other $3,810 a month. The final one close to $3,780 a month. Who can afford that?
Impossible. Yeah, they're squeezing us too much. There's a silver lining in this story. So first off, you might be wondering, why did she say pass President Trump's executive orders? You don't have to pass an executive order. No, it's because she signed on to HR 3493 because our audience asked her to. That's literal. And that is to lower drug prices. It's Trump's executive order that Ro Khanna turned into a bill. Once it's a bill, the courts can't knock it down. So they could actually go back in and now pass that if they were in session. And I love that Ro Khanna and Marjorie Taylor Greene are working together to try to lower drug prices. That's part of the silver lining here, which is the Great Awakening. So look, you could have two reactions to Marjorie Taylor Greene in this case, and both are legitimate and in their own way true. But let's talk about which one is more productive. You can go, you didn't know that you guys didn't have a healthcare plan this whole time? Yeah, welcome to planet Earth. You're so late, right? Or you could say, oh, thank God, she finally figured out the Republicans don't have a healthcare plan, right? Yeah, both are kind of true, but I like the second one better because it invites more people in. And a Republican realized that they have never had a healthcare plan and they're not gonna have one. And she's calling out her own side for it. That's awesome. And that's part of the Great Awakening. It starts with the voters, and so the voters are waking up in mass, and it's now pushing into Congress through Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ro Khanna, and some other progressives, where they're beginning to go, oh, I get it, the rest of you are all corrupt. You all work for the health insurance companies. That's why you're not doing this, and the American people are suffering because of it. There you go, that's awesome.
So I want to reset for the second half of the story because Marjorie Taylor Greene still plays a role, but there's another Republican who's pushing back, and I want to see where we all fall on this. So let's get into it. Just last night on CNN, Republican Senator Bernie Moreno had some choice words for Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here's what he had to say.
I would say to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I like her. She came out to Ohio a few times. She's certainly able to write a bill herself. Like if this is something she's passionate about, put pen to paper, write a bill, present an option. Don't just criticize what other people are doing.
Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene says to her own party, and I commend her for this, look, you guys don't want to renew the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, meaning that the premiums for Americans are set to double soon. If you don't like the Affordable Care Act and you'd like to replace it, what are your policy proposals? And of course, we all know they have none. And Moreno is saying, well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, why don't you draft the policy? Now, seconds later, Caitlin Collins asked Moreno the same question that Greene has been asking. What is the Republicans' plan for healthcare? And here's how that went.
Senator, you're saying that Republicans do have a plan.
Absolutely.
What is that plan?
Well,
I mean,
we have to have
can people see it?
Sure, we have to have PBM reform. We have to look at the ways that we have a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the healthcare system. We have to let the marketplace work. There's no transparency or competition. The whole system can be looked at very holistically, but it's going to take 3 or 4 months to really bring a consensus to that plan. In the meantime, what are we gonna do? Keep the government closed for 3 or 4 months every time that we have a policy debate? This is nuts.
They don't have a plan. They're still collecting our taxes while the government's been shut down for, how many days was it again? 29 days? They have no problem collecting our taxes. These Congress people have no problem collecting a paycheck, enjoying their healthcare benefits paid for by American taxpayers. He has no plan. They're such disgusting, despicable liars, Cenk.
They've had 15 years to come up with a plan. And he says, oh, we need another 3 or 4 months. And in 3 or 4 months from now, they'll say they need another 6 months and another 15 years because they don't care about you. They care about collecting checks from their donors. Their donors are giant health insurance companies and drug companies. They're totally bought. Okay, so that guy you just watched is 100% corrupt. So in terms of his theoretical fixes, he says, we could do something about PBMs. Those are pharmacy benefit managers. That's a real issue. That's a very important issue, actually. And there's the whole industry is nothing but a scam. They should have regulated that years ago. Mark Cuban is actually really good on this issue, and you should listen to what he has to say about that. Now he's got his own interest because he's got a company there, but he's right. Okay, the second, all the rest of the things that he mentioned, competition, deregulation, it's just a way of giving the corporations more power. It has nothing to do with helping you at all. It's a trick to help their donors rob you even more. And they don't seem concerned at all about our rates.
Not at all, are you
They're
kidding
like,
me?
oh, you're paying $3,800 a month. I don't know, maybe they're all multi-millionaires, so they think like, oh, is that a big number?
I mean, even for self-preservation, once Americans are hit with these premiums, they're gonna blame the Republicans because this is the one holdout. This is the one ask by the Democratic Party. The Democratic senators are saying, we will vote in favor of funding the government. We just want this one thing. We want to address the subsidies so premiums on healthcare don't double. And Republicans refuse to play ball.
Yeah,
because God forbid you give the other side a win. That's the way they're looking at this. It's not about doing what's right for Americans. In their minds, they think they're in a political war and somehow that political war is benefiting us all. No, it's not. It's benefiting their own egos.
Yeah, so the reason why we're in this situation is because in order to pass a continuing resolution, you need 60 senators because of the filibuster. So they need 7 Democratic votes. And the Republican proposal is, give me the votes for nothing. The Democrats are like, why? Why would we give it to you for nothing? No, shut up and do as we tell you.
It's because that's what they usually do,
Yeah.
but for the first time, they're actually fighting back.
Exactly, and we did a story last week about how the Democratic senators are secretly crying that they can't surrender to the Republicans. They're like, what? We always surrender. Why can't we surrender? I mean, our donors want us to surrender. This is so annoying.
But the Democratic voters are like, nah, we want to see you guys fight. Enough of this.
Which I love, Okay, so in order to get the 7 votes, the Democrats are saying what Anna's saying, which is, all right, look, we just have one ask. Don't let the premiums double. And it's not for us, it's for the average American, which is pretty rare for either party to do, right? Including the Democrats. So I'm like, all right, attaboy, Democrats. That one, you're actually fighting for the right thing. Republicans are like, no. We want the premiums to double, and we want your votes for nothing. Well, that's a ridiculous position. So now here's Marjorie Taylor Greene going, wait, you guys are saying that we're not gonna let the premiums double, then where's the question? Why don't we just give it to the Democrats, pass a continuing resolution, and bring the government back up? Where's the question? And the reality is, Marjorie Taylor Greene's being honest, and the rest of the Republicans are liars. That's why they're so mad at her. They're like,
they're furious.
They're like, what are you doing? We're supposed to be doing propaganda for our donors. And now she doesn't need the donors because she has grassroots support.
Exactly.
So they're screwed on that. She could just be as honest as she wants. And that's awesome.
It is a beautiful thing to see. All right, let's take our final break. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Steve Bannon versus Laura Loomer on the topic of Israel derangement syndrome. Because if you have a problem with mass slaughter of innocents, obviously you have derangement syndrome, according to Laura Insane Lunatic Loomer. We'll be back.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan.
All right, guys, a lot more. Let's start again in Super Chat. Chrome Chinchiller says, my question for corporate media and the US government has now become, is Netanyahu the literal God of all Jews? Why does the US government kneel and be a slave to him? Criticizing even by anti-Zionist Jews, and it's anti-Semitism. Who made foreign policy dissent a sin? Well, the Israeli supporters did. You're not allowed to dissent from America bowing its head to Israel. It must bow its head, and anyone who doesn't is an anti-Semite. We've been through this a million times.
But by the way, sorry to interrupt you, Jake, but Jeffrey Sachs, who's a national treasure, I love him. In fact, we should interview him on the show. He actually happens to be Jewish, not that that matters, but he's very critical of Israel and in fact loathes the fact that they keep referring to it as the Jewish state.
Yep.
Because, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, because the very next super chat was exactly about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Because the first guy is right. I mean, nobody elected Netanyahu the God of all Jews or the president of all Jews across the world, or let alone Jewish Americans. So stop saying that. It's not true. And you're doing it to protect the government. Anyways, Michael Cotavelli writes in, World Zionist Congress is currently going on in Israel, discussing how to censor campuses and social media in the US. As a Jew, I can't fathom how they don't see that feeds into anti-Semitic tropes when they talk about what must be done in the US.
It's all on purpose,
Michael,
and it makes me sick.
Man, I love you, brother. That is exactly right. So what I keep saying is not only am I trying to protect the Palestinians, but I'm also trying to protect Jews across the world, because these guys are doing one trope after another, and then going, ha, you can't criticize us for it. But here, Larry Ellison is gonna buy TikTok, and we're gonna have a conference about how we're going to manipulate America into giving us more money and supporting all of our war crimes. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're endangering Jews across the world with this nonsense. Now people go to Europe and they go to other places, and they're not Israelis, they're just Jewish people, and now they're worried for their safety because people are so mad at Israel. How does saying a Jew, like Katie Miller today on Piers Morgan when I'm debating her, she's like, no, she's defending the genocide, and she's like, it's a Jewish state. Why are you saying that? You're smearing people. Stop hiding behind Jewish civilians. It's driving me crazy. And so, okay, but anyway, Michael, you're awesome. That's exactly right. Okay, so now let's go to Faye Scott-Smith, a YouTube member. Is there any way of stopping Netanyahu? Who has the power to do so? Not everyone who gets food stamps is worthless. How do we stop all this? Hi, Anna, sending love from Warren, Pennsylvania. So, Faye, the number one thing we could do is super obvious and super easy if it wasn't for Israel controlling Congress, which is cut their money. And so, because that's our leverage. Well, first of all, I wouldn't cut it right away, by the way. I would threaten to cut it until they withdrew to the 1967 borders, freed the Palestinians, and you have two beautiful, safe, independent states, and no one's allowed to harm one another, right? It's so easy. You think they don't care about the $4 billion they get every year? You think they don't care about the $21 billion they got last year? Of course, they care deeply. Any country would. So, but the reason why that's literally never discussed in American media is because American media also works for Israel. So to them, the idea of cutting Israel's funding is unconscionable. They're like, that is like the craziest, most unacceptable idea anyone has ever had. No, you owe Israel. You owe it to them. You better get back to work for Israel. And that almost everyone in mainstream media believes that with all of their heart. So it's just propaganda, that's why.
Sloppy Steve.
All right, back on TYT Cenk and Anna. Project for Progress, a YouTube member asked whether the interviews are going to be live or just for members. No, they're going to be live, guys. So in about 15 minutes, we're going to talk to Graham Plattner, the Senate candidate that's in the news so much in Maine. And then after that, David Hogg. So stay right here. You'll all get to see it. Anna.
Before we get to any of that, we're going to do this.
Amid all this Israel derangement syndrome that we're seeing from many people on the right, they got to stop being so obsessed with Israel and so obsessed with the Jews. You know, it's not the Israelis that are going to have another 9/11 here in our country.
No. Hang on a second.
Not obsessed with the Jews. Am obsessed with the country that is sucking up our resources to commit atrocities and slaughter innocent people in the Middle East. And I'm not going to stop talking about it just because the likes of Laura Loomer accuse people like us of being obsessed.
Yeah,
I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with the country that's destroying our country. Go ahead, Cenk.
Yeah, so Stephen Miller is about to defend us. What? Okay, so things have taken a turn.
Stephen Bannon.
I'm sorry, Stephen Bannon, Stephen Miller, never.
Yeah.
But that goes to the point I was gonna make, Anna, which is that of all the people I give credit for turning around, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, etc., it's so hard to give Steve Bannon credit.
Don't give him credit.
Okay, so let's watch together and make the decision together.
The guy who's talking about Trump doing a third term, that guy?
No, I know, I'm perfectly aware.
Yeah. How's Curtis Yarvin doing?
Yeah.
How's that corporate monarchy plot working out?
That's what
I don't trust him at all. I don't trust Bannon at all. Anyway, with that in mind, so this discussion began when Loomer claimed that the Trump administration is being manipulated by the government of Qatar.
Yeah.
Hilarious, here's the clip.
I think it's important, Steve, for people to remember that we could have had the hostages out. We could have had the hostages out 2 years ago, but it was the Qataris that were providing safe haven to the leaders of Hamas so that they weren't killed by the IDF. Are those our allies? Where are the dead bodies of the American hostages that we were told that were going to be turned over weeks ago when this peace deal was finalized? Where are the bodies? We don't have the bodies yet. Qatar controls Hamas at the end of the day. They do. So I think that we need to have a real conversation, Steve, in the GOP, and hopefully, amid all this Israel derangement syndrome that we're seeing from many people on the right, you don't see these people ever talk about Islam. You don't ever see these people talk about the threat of Islam, Steve. And they got to stop being so obsessed with Israel and so obsessed with the Jews. It's not the Israelis that are going to have another 9/11 here in our country.
No. Hang on a second.
I'm worried about the threat of Zionism that has cost this country, when it comes to funneling our resources to Israel, at least $300 billion. We've definitely lost soldiers fighting Israel's wars. How many Muslim countries did we do that for?
Look, the entire global war on terror cost us $8 trillion, and 90% of it was to fight Israel's enemies.
And by the way, I was told by the likes of Laura Loomer that I should be very concerned about Muslim terrorists, like Al-Qaeda, for instance. Al-Qaeda carried out 9/11, so valid point, except now, at the behest of Israel, we're very supportive of the new Al-Qaeda terrorist leader of Syria. So when it comes to Israel's preferred Muslim terrorists, we'll be real friendly, even if those terrorists were part of the group that carried out the worst terror attack in US soil, in US history.
Netanyahu created Hamas because he wanted to split the Palestinians. And so he thought if they're divided, we'll get to say we have no partner for peace. And it'll be a good way of continuing to take more Palestinian land. Now he pretends that he's outraged by Hamas. So why did you help them?
Fund them?
Why did you help fund them? Look, the Israelis, they should be furious with Netanyahu, but I'm looking forward to Bannon's defense here.
All right, let's go to the next video.
If Netanyahu and if the Israeli government had dealt straight with us, you wouldn't have had this problem. They're liars. They've been stone cold liars. They gave bad information, so I'm not going to let that go unchallenged. That's just bullshit. Netanyahu's government has been atrocious, and we should have regime change in Jerusalem, and we should have it immediately. They've lied to the American government. They've lied to the American people consistently. You say Israeli derangement syndrome. It's not Israeli derangement syndrome. I certainly don't have it. What I have is the Greater Israel Project that was never done, no due diligence was done. The American people never signed off that. The Trump administration never signed off on that. That's a Netanyahu. We need regime change in Jerusalem, and we need it tonight. Okay? Everything that comes out of Netanyahu's government is a stone cold lie.
I happen to disagree with both of them entirely. No, it's not a regime issue in Israel. This is the identity of that country. The Greater Israel Project has been pursued, whether Netanyahu's in charge or some other political opponent of his is in charge.
Yeah, I think that, I hear you.
We need to decouple. We don't have to go to war with Israel, although I wouldn't be against it, but that's not gonna happen. I'd like to decouple. They are not our allies. Decouple, let's separate. No more money for you. No more aiding and abetting your war crimes. No more bribing Egypt so they play nice with you. Decouple, that's what I want. And then Israel can do whatever they want with their regime, but I want nothing to do with them. That's what I want. That's the correct answer. Go ahead, Cenk.
But in the old days, Laura Loomer would have spread that propaganda and Steve Bannon would have joined along, right? Now, Steve Bannon is saying regime change in Jerusalem. And we never signed off on the Greater Israel Project. That to me is the most important thing he said. Because finally, we're talking about Greater Israel. And that's what the Israelis talk about nonstop. They talk about how they're gonna take Judea and Samaria, West Bank, Gaza Strip, and they're gonna take southern Lebanon and western Syria and all these places. And they barely pretended self-defense in Israel. They love taking Arab land and they think that it's theirs, that God promised it to them and that America owes them that land acquisition and that empire that they want to create. And here's Steve Bannon, of all people on planet Earth, going, wait, when did we promise you an empire that we had to pay for? So the fact that he's telling his audience that and basically shutting Laura Loomer up is a beautiful thing. I agree with you, Steve Bannon should never be trusted, and him and Stephen Miller are the two guys who are most in favor of authoritarian government, and I can't stand it. But that's part of my point, that even one of the most toxic people on earth is saying Israel's too toxic for me. Netanyahu's too toxic for me. In fact, we got to pull up on it real quick on TYT.com. We asked you what you think about Bannon's comments. One, I agree, we should try to force him to step down. Two, it's not our business, but we should stop funding them. Three, it's not our business, let them run their own government. Four, Netanyahu is right. I don't know if anybody's gonna say Netanyahu is right, but I say defund them. I agree with you, decouple. We don't have to attack, we don't have to do anything. I want Israel to be a grown-up country. Stop attacking all your neighbors. You're responsible for your own war crimes and your own wars. You have nukes, you have Iron Dome, you have an amazing military. You don't need any more of our money. Stop attacking everyone, otherwise they're gonna attack you back and we're not gonna protect you. Oh no, but you have to protect us. No, we don't. You shouldn't start those wars. If someone starts a war, which Israel has done repeatedly, including in 1967 when they took the land in the first place, then we have no responsibility towards you at all.
At all, at all. In fact, you owe us.
Yeah, you do.
Pay us back.
Yeah.
All that money that you use for atrocities and land theft. Okay, no, I loathe the fact that we have any relationship with Israel. Okay, it's an embarrassment to this country.
They should give us the 300 billion back before we ask for the 8 trillion back. Because we fought all their wars for them. Iraq was their #1 enemy. Iraq was against Al-Qaeda, was not our enemy at all. At all. Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, but he was a bad guy towards Israel and against Al-Qaeda. They made us fight that war. One of the top neocons was Netanyahu. They totally control our government. More than, look, as much as I'm heartbroken about the genocide and it's at maximum level, right? I can't stand that they've ripped away our sovereignty from us even more.
100%.
Like the fact that we don't run our own government when we're supposed to be a democracy, and instead the Laura Loomers of the world browbeat everyone, cancel anyone who criticizes Israel. You're an anti-Semite, you're gonna be canceled and your life is gonna be ruined. And then, by the way, we have no control, but if you criticize Israel, you're gonna be fired and your life is going to be absolutely shattered, but no control. But what do you mean no control? We're gonna pay 90% of Congress, they're gonna vote with us 100% of the time, but you're not allowed to say control. No, I am allowed to say it. I'm an American. I don't agree to Israeli occupation of my government, okay? Yes, it is occupied. And those Congress people, by the way, the American Congress people who sell out our country just to get paid by Israeli lobby,
yeah,
they're worse than the Israeli government.
Of course.
Because they're betraying us.
Yeah, they should be tried for treason. They're traitors to this country, and I mean that. All right, final video we'll go to, because Laura Loomer says, no, come on, you think Israel is manipulating and controlling our government? That's crazy. There's a different country that has way more influence.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't say that people can't be critical of Israel, but I don't ever see any of the people that focus all of their efforts on criticizing Israel. I wish that they would criticize Qatar as well. My point is that if you're going to criticize Israeli influence in American politics, talk about the Qatari lobby, because the Qatari lobby has substantially way more influence on our American politics, Steve, and they spend way more money, they own way more real estate, and they're giving way more political favors to American politicians than the Israelis. The Qataris have the type of money that people dream that Jews have.
I don't know if they have more influence.
I'm not going to, but I've never wanted to utter the R word more than this very moment. Go ahead, Cenk.
Yeah, look.
Both of them, by the way.
Qatar has way too much influence. They got Trump the $400 million jet, right? UAE funneled $2 billion to Trump's organizations, which he makes about $80 million a year.
What's the influence, Cenk? Okay, sure, yeah, they gave him goodies, but like, what's the influence? Okay, how are they effing us in the ass the way Israel is?
No, I got you. I'm pointing out there's a lot of different countries that try to influence our politicians in different ways. They're mainly targeting Trump, right? UAE, Qatar, etc. But Israel has given money to 90% of Congress, and that 90% votes with Israel 100% of the time. So they totally own our Congress. It's not even close. No one takes money from the Qatari lobby in Congress, as far as I know. If you have names, no problem. I'd be against that 100%, okay? So this idea that Qatar, this tiny little country, is actually more powerful than Israel, which has given hundreds of billions of dollars to our politicians, bribed almost all of them, controls our media almost completely.
Yeah.
That Qatar has more influence than Israel. You got to be out of your mind to say that.
Yeah, we're not buying or believing your deflections and your distractions, bitch. Okay, it's not going to work.
Period. Okay, so we take a quick break here. Everybody stay right here. Graham Plattner is going to join us in the revolution, and then David Hogg after that. So a lot of amazing content left for you guys. Stay right here.
I was valedictorian in college.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
All right, back on TYT. We're doing the revolution segment normally here today, but we thought it was fitting to have Graham Plattner on. He's running in Maine for Senate, and he's certainly been in the news a lot, and so we wanted to have him on. Is he on, guys? All right, Graham, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Jack. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. So Graham, so obviously there's been a lot of controversy. They did some Oppo research on you, and they dug up stuff from your past. So we'll get to the tattoo maybe, but I want to talk about some of the stuff that you wrote earlier, right? It's in such stark contrast to what you say on the campaign trail. So for example, you talk about some of the folks in Maine who are right wingers or who are cops, et cetera. But we gave you credit here on the Young Turks before any of this stuff broke, because you did this great little thing at a town hall where you said, look, don't hate the Republican voters. The real problem is the leadership and the politicians. So what happened between writing that stuff and now that made you change your mind?
Well, first and foremost, if you actually read most of my Reddit comments, I spent a long time defending rural Mainers. From what I saw were mostly elitist attacks from people not in my part of the state. There's a bit of a, I don't know, there's a idea that rural Mainers are uneducated, whatever, and that's not my experience, and I've pushed back against that for a long time. I made one comment in which I said that some people in rural Maine were racist and stupid, and that. And honestly, I have met some people who do fit that moniker. Certainly it is not most people by any stretch of the imagination. That's why I choose to live here. It's also where I was born and raised. I very much am of this place. I also would say that, around the time I was saying that, I think it was 2019, 2020, I still saw people maybe on the other side as being on the other side. But I've lived now long enough here, developing really close relationships in the town I was born and raised in, getting very, very entrenched in my community. And I don't believe in, frankly, other sidism when it comes to working people these days. I think working people in the state of Maine, we all have the exact same material interests. We all have when the hospital closes, it doesn't matter who you voted for. And I think the only way that we're gonna move forward is by recognizing that is true. Recognizing that we all have far more in common with each other and developing empathy and compassion with each other to recognize that we're not always gonna agree on everything, but we do need to recognize that it is only together that we're gonna be able to build power to move forward.
So I was debating someone about you, and they intimated that you're incredibly rich and that you chose to do this whole going into the military as almost like a shtick or something. So does your family have tremendous wealth?
No, my mother has been, well, she started a restaurant when she was about, I think 18 or 19 in the early 70s. She has run restaurants or food my whole life. My parents got divorced when I was young, when I was around 6. My father is a small town attorney. My grandfather, his dad, was a pretty successful architect and designer back Warren Platner, very famous in the mid-century modern realm. But that didn't translate to my upbringing. I didn't grow up in poverty. I grew up, I would say, solidly middle class. But my parents have worked my entire life. My mother continues to work because she's in her 70s, but she's still running a restaurant because she does not have enough money to retire. And I myself, my wife Amy and I, if somebody wanted to come and see my life, they would be, I think, rather put out in saying that we have a lot of money. We certainly don't.
Okay, so people of course talk about your Nazi tattoo, so-called Nazi tattoo, but in the Reddit comments you said something about communism. So I was just wondering, are you a Nazi or a communist?
Yeah, the political trajectory that my opponents have put me through has been quite. There's a lot of whiplash there. Consistency does not seem to be their strong suit on this front. I am neither a Nazi or a communist. I have never been, in fact, either one. I have been a dedicated anti-fascist since I was a kid. I mean, I grew up listening to Dead Kennedys and the Dropkick Murphys, and have had a distinct hatred of Nazis my entire life, which makes all of these attacks, I mean, frankly, all the more insane. And I'm also not a communist, although on the internet, when I was getting in arguments with people, I would sometimes refer to myself as that, but clearly in jest, if anybody read them instead of just jumping onto them. I'm neither. I'm a United States Marine, and I also think people should have health care. That tends to be where I fall.
Yeah, so look, the last thing on I wanna get to your policies, the last thing on all the so-called controversies, or second to last. So the reason I ask it in that way is because it's absurd. You can't be a Nazi and a communist, it makes no sense, right? And they did the same thing to me. I would write things as a joke about myself, and they would say, oh no, it's not a joke. You actually think this about women, or you want to do this, like it's just absurd, totally absurd. And mainstream media does it on purpose, if you ask me, right? So, but on the tattoo, so look, I didn't know that was a Nazi tattoo. You say you didn't know that it was, and I think the only thing left in that so-called controversy, from my point of view, is some of your staffers said that you knew it a little bit before it became public. And so you had like a little bit of a window to do something about it, and you didn't. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, that's the staffer that left just a couple days after the governor announced, I may add. Yes, is now out there accusing me of all kinds of things. We found out a couple days before I got the tattoo covered up. Because I didn't know. We were contacted by a media outlet, and in talking to them, because I'll be honest, when they first came to me, they were like, "Do you have a white supremacist tattoo?" And I laughed. I was like, "What? Of course, that's insane." It's like antithetical to my politics. And then obviously I have a skull and crossbones tattoo, and stylized skull and crossbones tattoos are very popular amongst combat units of all kinds across history and in the modern world. That's why I got a skull and crossbones, because I was a machine gunner. I don't think we have to get into details as to why that makes sense.
Right.
But when I saw the similarities, and it was pointed out directly to me, I mean, I certainly don't want anything like that in my body. And I found out, I think on a Thursday, I had a very busy weekend, and it was covered up by a Tuesday. So I moved as quickly as one can get a tattoo in Eastern Maine.
Whenever I got into a couple of debates about you, and everybody always says, no, we don't think he's a secret Nazi. Then what's the issue? I don't know what the issue is. Like, either you've been planning this for decades, and when you get into the Senate, you're gonna go, right? But all of your statements otherwise have been against that type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I just don't. The context clues doesn't make sense.
Because I've been a vocal anti-fascist my entire life. So there is a like
that. So
ridiculous. I mean, I can't. I'm taking it. I'm not taking it seriously. I mean, I got the thing covered up, but there is an element of this where it's just like so obviously not who I am, but there still is this insistence on. I don't even know what it's like some weird innuendo.
It is. The whole point is innuendo. Is to smear you. So obviously it's Oppo research. So are you guys doing Oppo research on Janet Mills and Chuck Schumer to see if there's skeletons in their closet? Because you should, I'm serious. You definitely should, because they put a hatchet right in your back. There's no reason why you shouldn't do likewise.
Yeah, although I will say, like, this is literally what I hate about politics. Like, this is also theatrical and aesthetic. It's not, and I think honestly, it's what most Americans hate about politics. I have a deeper belief in what politics is than the mudslinging and the TV ads and all that. I mean, I come at this point in my life, I'm a firm believer that politics is about policy. It's also about building power and using power when you have it. And I think that is something that I don't want to get dragged in too much to the nonsense. And there is I legitimately think that if as I've been doing for the past month, go around the state of Maine, talking to working Mainers about the material needs in their lives, where society is failing them and falling short. That's what people want to talk about. People are not interested in the mudslinging. They're not. In fact, that's why I think many people feel so jaded and disillusioned with politics in this country, because that's what politics is now. It's like, who's got the best Oppo research? Who can like come up with the most utterly insane stuff to throw on the news? I think what Mainers want is somebody to represent them who very clearly comes from the real world and is talking to them in plain language about what it is we need to change to improve their lives.
Yeah, look, I would advise anybody that I'm talking to in politics, look up every donor of your corporate candidate that's opposing you, because that's not mudslinging. That's, do you represent the voters or do you represent the donors? And I've never seen an establishment Democrat that represented the voters. They always represent their donors. Anyways, look, Graham, the most legitimate question, and it comes from our audience as well, is, yes, but how do we know this brother isn't gonna pull a Fetterman on us? And that's a good question, and it's really hard to answer.
As somebody who has been very, very, very cynical about politics for quite some time, if I was looking at myself, I would have the same question. My answer is, one, I very much, the policies that I am pushing are very, very clear, and I'm not going to be walking them back. I also think that my sort of journey through this life, which everybody now can essentially read chronologically on Reddit posts, it's brought me to a point where, I mean, I am deeply, deeply frustrated and disillusioned with the American political system. I am taking this on because there feels like a moment in American history, certainly here in the state of Maine right now, where we have the ability to kind of rebuild power at the local level, rebuild power on the ground level. People are angry and they are frustrated and they are looking to get into the fight. And we have a party that has failed to give them answers, has failed to give them mechanisms to get involved. That is what we're trying to do with this. And I think that these are just words coming out of my mouth. And so I absolutely understand that people can take it all with a grain of salt. I definitely get it. But where I am politically, I'm never going to walk back my criticism of the Democratic Party for supporting a genocide in Gaza. I am never going to walk back Medicare for all. I am never going to be walking back the need for us as a party not to give ground on progressive issues, but to focus on finding common ground around material issues with other working people. Those are the things I'm absolutely focused on. And again, I understand the question, but I'm absolutely not going to be a John Fetterman.
Yeah, last thing, because I know you got to go. And next time we'll talk a lot more about your policies, et cetera. You mentioned a bunch of them there, which I'm glad to hear, and I'm glad how definitively you said it. But if you had to describe yourself as something, and I'm not trying to pigeonhole you into just a phrase or a word, so you can expand upon it. But would you call yourself a Democrat, a left-wing, progressive, populist, economic populist? What are you?
I would say that I'm a working people's populist. I truly, the core of my politics is that we need to build a movement. We need to build popular power with people. It's the only way we're gonna fight the money. We'll never outraise them. We don't have enough, they've got all of it. But we do have people. And I firmly believe that the reason we need to build that power is so we can go fight for economic policies that are gonna materially improve the lives of working people in this country.
There you go. All right, Graham Plattner running for Senate in Maine. Graham, what's your website?
It's grahamforsenate.com. And I will say right now, we can definitely use the help. We can definitely use donations. We're not taking corporate PAC money. I'm not taking APAC money. We're relying on small dollar donations. But also, we are trying to build a movement here. When I say that, it's not just a throwaway line. And if you live in Maine, or even if you're out of Maine and you want to get involved, please sign up to be one of the 11,000 volunteers we already have. We need all the help we can get in this fight.
Oh, you said populist. I forgot whether we already talked to you about this or not. Did you see the populist plank that we have? Have you signed on to that? Do you know about that?
I've seen it. I've been so busy, I haven't had the time to reach out. But I watched the show, so I am aware. Okay. But yeah, I'd love to connect.
All right, that sounds great. All right, Graham Plattner, everybody in Maine. We appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it.
All right, so this is our revolution segment. We had him on partly because it was so much in the news, but also partly because he's kind of, if you get past the scandals and the Oppo research and all that stuff, the core of what he's doing and what he just explained to you guys is the exact kind of revolution we're talking about, where you fight for working people, not the donor class, not the elites, not Democratic leadership like Chuck Schumer or Republican leadership. So I'm glad we had a chance to have that conversation. We do have David Hogg coming up in about 10 minutes, but I want to use the rest of the time here to tell you guys about other things that you all have been doing, because we're trying to crowdsource this revolution. Graham just talked about 11,000 volunteers he's got up in Maine. We've got a lot of volunteers here working on amazing things, including Arpan, who we've talked about a couple of times, because we want to do a site. In fact, it was a Project for Progress, who I quoted earlier in the show. That's a handle on TYT members section that came up with the idea. Hey, why don't we just track all of the corruption? And so we asked you guys to vote on a name, and you guys voted on corruptionwatch.us. And so we got that URL, and then Arpan just started building this site. He's got a new video with updates to the site, so let's watch that.
Okay, guys, so I think the website, the light version is done. So really quickly, I want to give you a rundown. So you're looking at the desktop version right now. The mobile version is also still working, but I just wanted to show you the desktop one today. So you can search for any senator or House representative from 2003 to present, so the 108th Congress to present. So let's say we search Nancy Pelosi. You can see if they're active or not. Select Nancy Pelosi. As like last time, you can see all the different contributions from different organizations or people and the percentages. You can look at bills, and what I've added is a better user interface for selecting, like filtering for bills. So I can select the bill type, whether it's House resolution, House bill, Senate, House joint resolution, etc., and I can filter it by that and uncheck it. But I can also filter by subjects now. So the subjects that you see here match this. So let's say I want to look at health bills, and these are bills that were enacted into law since the 108th Congress. Let's say we're going to look at health, and I'm interested in seeing, okay, all these bills are health related. Now I'm wanting to see, okay, which individuals or organizations from the health sector or this topic gave Nancy Pelosi money. So if I select health, the pie chart updates, and you can see the dollar values from that sector and who has given her money. You can still sort, and also you can uncheck this. When you uncheck it, it goes back to the original pie chart, and then you can still sort the bills by date. And then the donor search still works just the same. So if I just type in Pfizer, I can click on Pfizer, and I can see what all individuals Pfizer has contributed to above $2,000. This is just a light version. There's probably going to be some data inaccuracies here and there. We need to load more data in here because we're not getting everything. We're not getting dark money. I don't think we're getting super PAC money. So we're still working on that, but at least it's up and running. There shouldn't be any major issues other than maybe some data inaccuracies here and there, which we will definitely fix. And yeah, I'm really excited. This will go live very soon.
That's amazing. We didn't build that. He built that. And how many months did it take him? No, he built it in a couple of days. That's why I wanted to crowdsource. My God, Arpan, if we tried to build that thing, it would have taken us so long and so much money. There's so much talent in the American people. No one ever asks you to use it for a good purpose. So I'm asking, and Arpan delivered on that one. There's so many others that have delivered on so many other wonderful things that we're doing here. But I mean, look, guys, from that video, there's two things I already saw on the site that was super interesting. Looked at the top 5 Nancy Pelosi donors lifetime as he was describing it. And in the top 5 were securities and investment, which is just really finance, and then the finance industry, okay, which is also finance, right? So 2 out of our top 5 are finance industry. Of course, and then you see the Democratic Party constantly bailing out the bankers, as Pelosi and Obama did back in 2008, and making sure that their bonuses are paid. Why? Because they've been lifelong donors to Nancy Pelosi. They were the #1 donors to Barack Obama in the 2008 campaign. If you're a Democrat, I hate to break your heart, but it's true. And what we're doing here is totally nonpartisan. So yeah, I'm on the left, right? I'm populist left. But the Democratic leadership isn't populist at all. They're not left, and the Republicans aren't right. They're both, the politicians in those two parties don't care about the left-right spectrum at all. They don't care about our policy imperatives. All they care about is those charts that you just saw on corruptionwatch.us. Site's not live yet. As you see, Arpon's working on it, right? And then we're gonna make it live at one point, and then you'll get to play around with it yourself. And then if you noticed, when he went to healthcare, I was looking at the pie chart to see where most of our donations came from. For example, if they came from employees, no problem. That's just random people that happen to work in healthcare. Actually, Bernie Sanders has a lot of donors who happen to work in healthcare, but they're actually nurses and et cetera. They're not the CEOs. CEOs sometimes funnel money that way, right? But in Nancy Pelosi's case, it was not employees. It was a giant list of people that were mainly in the industry. And pharmaceuticals came in the top 5 again, but mainly it was health services, health industry. So why do we have this insane system of privatized healthcare? Nancy Pelosi said, I've been fighting for universal healthcare. I got a poster for universal healthcare in my basement. I've had it for like 30 years. Yeah, that's where you buried universal healthcare, in your basement. And what you do it for? Well, I just saw it in the website we're putting together. You did it because you took an unbelievable amount of money from the health insurance industry and the drug companies. So none of these people are angels. What mainstream media fed you was just nothing but propaganda. Oh, if you're a Republican, these corporate Republicans are looking out for you. I mean, yeah, they're giving all the tax cuts to the rich and to the corporations, and then they're taking the tax cuts, not enough deregulation so they can merge and have even more power. And that's not enough, plus monopolies for the drug companies, where they literally have patents that last, instead of 5 years, which is normal, 12 years. It's unbelievable. Plus, you can't negotiate drug prices. Plus, on top of that, we have to give them subsidies. So the oil companies get $35 billion. The pharmaceuticals, we pay for all their research, or almost all their research, through the universities, public universities. But how often have you heard that in mainstream media? I have it at near zero. Like in all of cable news history, New York Times, Washington Post might have mentioned it a handful of times in 50 years, when in reality, you look at a site like that, you go, this explains everything. Follow the money, follow the money. That's why the Democrats aren't left wing, the Republicans aren't right wing. Those are just corrupt politicians who are robbing all of us on behalf of their donors, which by the way, are very similar donors, as we're about to see when the site goes live. So beautiful work, I love it. I'm gonna do one more update for you guys, then we'll go to David Hogg. And so Corey wrote in with another idea, said, my idea is to host live demonstrations here in North Carolina to show people how to use the database and get them engaged. The goal is to make political transparency something the public can take part in, essentially crowdsourcing the revolution. All right, there you go, attaboy, Corey. To tie it all together, I'd also perform my clean, nonpartisan rap song, The Revolution, at these events. The song's message fits perfectly with the theme of empowering everyday people to get involved and hold leaders accountable. I will, of course, send you the complete project once it's done, which will be very soon. I'm dying for Cenk and Anna to hear it. I promise it's good. I wanted to ask if TYT might be interested in being involved in any way, whether through support, collaboration, or simply help spreading the word. And if direct involvement isn't possible, I'd really appreciate any ideas or resources you might have for raising funds to cover venue costs. I'm gonna have flyers of some sort with QR codes to bring people to the database, TYT's website, if that's okay, and also set it up where people can donate to the cause. I'd like to have 100% of donations go to TYT because I truly believe in the cause and want to help strengthen it however I can. Look, so not every idea is something that we could do and right away, et cetera. In terms of your concert idea, Wolfpack has been trying to get me to help to put together a concert for over a decade now. So guys, live events are super hard to put together. I'm keeping it real. In terms of donations for TYT, hold on. Although that's lovely, and I'll take it when we're doing the main show, right? But right now, for this project, we don't yet have a need for donations. We don't yet have a need for a staffer, right? So hold off on that. I'm not trying to stop you overall, and I love you for thinking about it and wanting to do it. but we're not there yet, okay? In terms of letting people know about the database in any way, shape, or form, amazing, wonderful. Keep spreading the word, guys. Spread the word about, we're doing this revolution segment at 8 o'clock Eastern or actually Monday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, and usually Fridays sometimes, but almost every day. We do Tuesdays, Operation Joy, that's different. But outside of Tuesday, we're doing this revolution segment at 8 o'clock Eastern. Like, share the videos, share the stream. None of this costs you anything, right? We're just trying to get the word out, because the more we have power here together collectively, right, left, center, etc., when we push together in social media or in any other way, it's gonna have more impact. So let's bring as many people here as we can. So, and the second reason, by the way, is, yeah, when we push together, it's a lot more impactful if 3,000 people do it rather than 30 people do it, as an example. But also, the more people that are here, the more web developers we're gonna have a social media genius coming around soon. I'm positive of it. We don't have it yet, but we will, I'm sure. Some of you out there are gonna create incredible memes and graphics and videos and etc. So the more people there are, the more likely we can crowdsource this revolution. So let's keep it going. We're gonna talk to you about it again tomorrow. But now we'll go to the conversation, which is a different show, and I'll interview David Hogg there. So stay right here. All right, joining us now is David Hogg. He is leader of Leaders We Deserve. He was, of course, co-founder of March for Our Lives, and I think a lot of you know about his past. He was also vice chair of the DNC, and we're, of course, going to talk about that a little bit as well. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Cenk. How are you?
Good, brother. How you doing?
You know, just dealing with the creeping authoritarianism and seeing the horrific stuff that happened to Kat today with the indictment.
Yeah, indeed. So we got a lot to talk about. First, we'll get to your brief era at the DNC. I'm very curious about that, right? But I want people to know about Leaders We Deserve first, and then at the end, we'll probably talk about the candidates. But so, what is the point of the group?
The point of the group is to help elect more people, just like Maxwell Frost. I got started out helping out him in his congressional race, and with his campaign manager, we saw how hard it was for him to run for office. He was 24 years old at the time when he was running. He was running against two former members of Congress, one of whom had run a hedge fund while being a member of Congress, and the other had committed tax fraud while being a member of Congress, both of whom were Democrats. And the reason why Maxwell is the right person for that race wasn't just because he was young necessarily, it's because he had the right experience and he wasn't corrupt as hell. He had worked in the gun safety movement since he was 15 years old, advocating with survivors from Sandy Hook and other instances of gun violence at state legislatures and in Congress to strengthen gun laws. He'd done work with the ACLU as well to hold President Biden accountable on the Hyde Amendment to get him to change his stance on it. So we saw how hard it was for him to get elected. And once he was elected, we thought it was amazing, but we needed more people like him to be in Congress, to be in state legislatures. So we created Leaders We Deserve to kind of be like an Emily's List for young Democrats, young progressive Democrats running for state legislature and Congress who don't take corporate money. What I'd like to say is we're like a lumbar support for candidates with a spine, where we come in and we'll spend a substantial amount of money in races on the order of several $100,000 to $1 million+ in some instances to get candidates across the finish line, and not just give them money, but give them advice on a day-to-day basis, make sure that their finances are in order, make sure that they are doing everything they can to get local endorsements, build the right field program, and make sure that we're kind of standing up to be not a special interest, but help stand for the people's interests. So candidates can actually stand for what their constituents want and not special interests.
So David, a couple of groups now are progressive and don't take corporate PAC money, including Just Democrats as an example. So is the distinction here that you're mainly helping younger candidates?
Yeah, so I would say the difference with us and Justice Democrats, although we do collaborate on some races like Justin Pearson or Donovan McKinney, both of whom are challenging incumbent Democrats in safe Democratic seats, is we work a lot at the state legislative level. That's about the cycle where half of our work is going to end up being. And on top of that, we work obviously in red to blue races too, because we want to help win back the House. So there is some overlap with groups like Justice Democrats, but a lot of our work is especially in state legislatures, in states that the party is largely written off because they think that it's not going to flip immediately or is not worth investing in. States like Texas, states like North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and others that we know that we're going to need to start really having a bench in, an infrastructure in, to have a pathway to 270 electoral votes. After the 2030 redistricting and census reapportionment that happens, where states like California are going to lose several electoral votes and congressional districts. Meanwhile, states like Texas, Utah, Arizona, and Florida are going to gain several congressional districts and electoral votes. So we're trying to invest right now in the young people that are building real networks in those states. And this weekend, I'm actually going to be traveling to two of those states in the South to support our candidates. I'm going to Houston, Texas to support Christian Menifee in his special election out there for Congress. And I'm going to Atlanta, Georgia to support our candidate, Akbar Ali, who will be 21. And then I'm going to New York to support Zohran, who we were the largest financial contributor to in his super PAC, in support of him, giving them $300,000 in the final weeks in the lead up to the campaign. And one thing that I also urge people to understand about us is that our funding model is not like a lot of groups that are out there. We're not funded by just a couple extraordinarily wealthy people. We're funded by 220,000 individual donors around the country that support us. And that enables us to have something that many groups can't, which is independence. After we supported Zohran, Cenk, there were two major donors that called me up that had offered several $100,000 in support, or had given over $100,000 in support before, and said, we're not going to support you anymore because you supported Zohran. But because the vast majority of our support comes from small dollar donors, that means that the organization's work continues, even though those donors don't necessarily agree with a candidate like Zohran, because he wants to, if they don't agree with him on any number of issues, from taxing the wealthy more to Israel or anything like that. Because we're not here to just do the work of what the donor class wants. We're here to be, like I said, the people's interest, there instead of a special interest.
Donors on behalf of Israel pulling their funding depending on whether a candidate supports Israel or not. But I'm sure that does not affect Congress at all, or any of our politicians. Okay, anyways, so now let's go to your time at the DNC. Before we get into the kind of controversies, what was
What are you talking about?
What was the thing that you learned inside the DNC that you were surprised by?
A thing that I learned inside of the DNC that I was surprised by. Because I think how many people do not understand what the DNC actually does, and in comparison to what they think it does a lot of the time. I think there's a lot of people, who think that who mix up the DNC with party committees, for example, like the DS that helps with Senate campaigns and supporting Democrats there, or the DCCC that helps with US House races, or the DLCC that helps with state legislative races. And those things are not the same, right? The Democratic National Committee's job is essentially to be the presidential campaign in waiting. It's to manage the voter file. It's to help raise money for local and state parties, and to help manage the debate schedule and platform of the party. It doesn't have that much of a role, or really any, in these Senate races or in these congressional House races or anything like that. So I think that's the main thing. In addition, I think that everybody wants the DNC to be, they all have their own idea of what the DNC should be doing or what it should be. The problem is there's really two roles that people are trying to make it be at the same time. Everybody wants it to be like a coach for the party, to be the organization that helps support the candidates that they want to see more of in the Democratic Party. And then there's the other side of that, where some people believe that it should just be like a referee in the party, of managing primaries and supporting just the general infrastructure of the party. The problem is, if everybody wants the DNC to be like a coach for their version of what they believe Democrats can be, that's great, but everybody has a different idea of what that can be, and it's kind of impossible to do that.
So you're worried that people want them to be a coach, and it's too hard to do that. That's interesting. Okay,
in some sense, it's like it's just that it's not just that though. It's that in order to gain power inside of the DNC for somebody like Ken Martin, to become the chair of the DNC, a lot of the time it is just determined by essentially how long you've known a lot of people and what type of relationships you have with them. It's not determined necessarily by, well, who's the most charismatic person on TV, or who is the person that has the best messaging necessarily for the party. It's very insular. It's about what is your relationship like with 450 members of the DNC. And ultimately, when you're somebody like Ken Martin and you have all those relationships over the course of 8 years, because you've been the chair of the state Democratic Party chairs, you're gonna have a lot more relationships than somebody like Ben Winkler, who was going out there, going on TV and getting a lot of public support, obviously. But there's a fundamental disconnect between what the individuals inside of the establishment of the party, like the DNC members, want, versus what the general public believes that we should have in a chair of the DNC, for example.
Well, so that leads perfectly into the question that I wanted to ask you next, which is, how did you win the vice chair position? Because and were you surprised given the dynamic you just described?
I think I won because of ageism, ironically, in some senses. I think that people really assumed that I did not know what I was doing, and it was I was able to catch them by surprise, because what I did is I asked people for their advice, and I asked them, what do I need to do to win this? And they said, just call every single DNC member, because they give you a list of them nonstop, basically, until you get an answer from them, and ask them, what can you do to earn their support? And look, there was actually somebody who, when I ran the first time, the first call that I made when I decided to run, I had never talked to this person before, and they supported, it was actually a younger person who is part of like the youth infrastructure of the Democratic Party. that I called to ask for their support. And what this person said to me was, David, let's be honest here. I know you don't know me and we've never talked before, but this is a bad idea. You cannot win. There's no pathway to victory and you should not be doing this. And what I learned from that process, what I practiced was some of the tactics that I learned actually talking to people who are often armed and vehemently disagree with me, that are armed counter protesters outside of different public events and things that I did or do. And what I said to them is like, I respect that you don't agree with me, but I still care a lot about obviously supporting younger people in the Democratic Party. So I would love to stay in touch with you and get your advice and get your thoughts, because I genuinely wanted it, even if they weren't supporting me. And as I continued talking to that person, and I racked up more endorsements, Tim Walz ended up endorsing me. And you'll never believe who called me immediately after Tim Walz endorsed me and said, oh my God, this is so great. What can I do to support you? And I think what I did through the process is, even though people at times were rude to me or wrote me off or thought that I just never would do it, I just kept my head down and did the work and stayed focused on earning people's support, even if they initially didn't support me, because I didn't take it personally. I knew I had a lot to prove as a young person, as somebody who had never been that super active in a state Democratic Party or anything like that. But what I saw was an opportunity for me to be the change that I wanted to see. At the first meeting of the DNC that I ever went to, or the first executive meeting I ever went to prior to being elected, when I was considering running for the position, it was the first executive committee meeting they had after the presidential election, and they were reviewing why did we lose. The first thing they brought up was our pollster at the DNC brought up was 18 to 29-year-old voters. And I looked at this table of about, I think it was 40 people on this committee, and I didn't see a single one of them that was under the age of 35 on the committee. And I saw an opportunity for me to be the change that I wanted to see. And when I ran, I said, I'm not going to change my values, and I'm going to tell people what they believe they need to hear and not just what they want to hear. And I genuinely thought it was very likely that I would not win, but I was going to give it my best and do everything that I could to get across that finish line. And I think because of the fact that I was 24 years old, many people thought that I just could not do it. But because I put my head down, I did the work, and they underestimated me, I ended up being able to win in that position. And then they decided to redo the election later on when I said we need to challenge some older members of Congress and get some fresh blood in the party. But that's a story for your next question, I'm sure.
Yeah, almost there. What you're describing sounds like a lot of the voting members of the DNC sound pretty conservative. I don't know if I mean that perfectly politically, certainly by a matter of nature and maybe even politically. So am I hearing that right?
Some of them certainly are more conservative. I had some very interesting conversations at times with more conservative Democrats in our party. But what I will say is, surprisingly, the first Democratic Party state party that endorsed me as a whole was actually North Dakota. There were a lot of red states that supported me early on. Chair Gina Repass in Kansas was incredibly supportive of me through the process and heavily encouraged me to run. This is not to say that certainly all or even most of the DNC members are ageist by any means, and I want to be clear about that. But there were actually a lot of people who were supportive of me, even though I had obviously was a progressive, and there are progressives that are DNC members as well. And God bless them. It is not an easy role to be in, but certainly some of them are more conservative, I will say that much. But I think the bigger thing that I realized while I was running is I think there's a lot of people in our party who frankly don't even really know what they believe in, other than what they believe will help them get on a better committee or help them get on into some higher position. And I think that's a big mistake that we make as Democrats. I think that people assume that if you kind of just compromise on your values, that you can exchange that for power, when in fact, I think it's the exact opposite. I think that when you compromise on your values, you are actually giving up on your power. Look at somebody like Zohran, right? If he compromised his values when he was polling at 1% in order to start polling better and then get to the position he's in now, sure, he would win. But ultimately, who is really winning if he did compromise his values? It wouldn't be him. It would be the people he was compromising towards.
Yeah. So at this late date, though, you're saying there's still there's some, but not a lot of progressives at the DNC.
Certainly, and if they speak out, obviously there are times. Every state committee, state parties have different rules in terms of how they get elected and everything, and then get into those positions. But I think part of the challenge, to be honest with you, and this is not to give the DNC a free pass by any means, but part of the challenge is that, think about if you're in Ken Martin's position, right? Or any of the vice chair's positions. If there's something that the party or more specifically Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries are doing that you don't agree with, you can't really speak out against it, because if you do, it's like, okay, what does it matter? They are that's the Speaker of the House, the minority Speaker of the House, and then you have somebody like Chuck Schumer as the minority leader, and it's ultimately creates this kind of disconnect where it's like, yeah, you have this title, you have this position, but ultimately you don't actually have the power that goes along with it to be able to dictate what Democrats in Congress are actually doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does a little bit. And I think Ken Martin's often caught in tough situations. So that leads me to the next question, which is, you put him in a little bit of a tough situation. And I'm very curious about this one. Not the second time when they actually ousted you, but the first issue that came up was, hey, listen, you're running this PAC, Leaders We Deserve, that we talked about, and we want the DNC to be neutral, which is a rule that I like and is a rule that progressives originally came up with. And I thought that was a bit of a fair criticism. So what do you make of that?
Well, what I'll say about that is, when I ran to be a vice chair of the DNC, I read the bylaws to understand, could I even do this in terms of having a PAC that works in primaries when I was a vice chair of the DNC. And I looked at the people who were vice chairs previously, people like Gretchen Whitmer and Tammy Duckworth, both of whom had PACs. And when I read the bylaws, it said that it didn't say anything about you not being able to be involved in primaries other than the presidential, because that really is what the DNC has control over, is the presidential primary. And then the fact of the matter is as well that the DNC does give money to groups like the DCCC and the DS, who famously, as you just saw with Graham, I'm sure in your interview mentioned this, the DS does get involved in primaries and does have their candidates. And my argument was, if you're going to remain totally neutral, and I'll tell you what I said to Ken. I said, look, if you want to change this bylaw, I don't believe that you should set the precedent that you can change the bylaw that then results in one of your officers, like myself, being outside of the lines of that bylaw. So what if we met in the middle and you passed this and I supported it, so long as you added in a grandfather clause? Because I understand the philosophy behind wanting to have all officers of the DNC remain neutral, but I just don't believe that we should set the precedent of being able to change the bylaws that then results in an officer all of a sudden being outside of the lines if they were elected, they weren't previously, if that makes sense. But ultimately what happened is they decided that there was issues, I'll say conveniently, but that they believed that there were issues with the way that the election was conducted. And what I believe happened is that they saw that if they did change the bylaw, it would require a 2/3 majority in order to remove me, instead of a simple majority that they could do just through simply saying there was an issue with the election and then redoing it. And ultimately, when it came down to that, I decided not to run for re-election, because we have bigger things to focus on right now than a ceremonial volunteer role at the DNC or a title there, when I'm going to do the work that I believe we need to do to win back young people, which is supporting people like Zohran.
Yeah, so I thought the bylaw debate was an interesting and legitimate one, and I might have agreed with Ken on that one, but I would have wanted to hear your side of it. And you're making a really interesting point about Tammy Duckworth and others having run PACs before as vice chairs. So that's a super good, legitimate debate. There's nothing wrong with having that debate, and the compromise you offered is an interesting one too. Let me say this
one other thing, Cenk, as well.
Yeah.
When I brought up, just for your audience's total awareness and your awareness as well, when I was in these conversations with the DNC and I talked to leadership and I said, okay, let me paint you a picture here. Let's say that this bylaw goes through and future president, I don't know, Gavin Newsom appoints Governor Westmore of Maryland to be a vice chair of the DNC. And Governor Westmore has a PAC that gives to an incumbent in a primary, right? Are you going to say to the president of the United States, I'm sorry, your friend Governor Westmore has just violated the DNC's bylaw, and we are now going to remove him by a 2/3 vote? And you know what the response that I got was I can't speculate on the future.
I mean, that's amazing, because that's the thing,
that just like, if we're going to be real about this,
yeah.
If we're going to be real about this, right? Let's make it an actually enforced rule and not just have this be a one-time thing. And when somebody tells me like, oh, I just can't speculate on the future, when I ask them whether or not this rule is going to be enforced, and they continue to insist on giving to groups like the DCCC and the DSCC that both famously get involved in primaries, and we are actively funding state parties that absolutely rig primaries in favor of certain candidates against other ones by pulling things like the voter file away from candidates challenging incumbents at times. And this is not all state parties, but there are some that do this. And I'm told there's just nothing we can do about that. It's hard for me to take it seriously.
Yeah, and they're not neutral in the presidential race either. The one they're supposed to be neutral on.
They should be.
Yeah. So they should be, but they're not. I mean, like, so I ran as a protest candidate against Biden to try to get other people to go in the race, et cetera. And to your point about North Dakota, I did the best in Oklahoma. So there's good progressives and populists everywhere, right? But no, they would pull the voter files, and then they wouldn't. In some states, they just don't put you on. They're like, so what? Right. We're cheating. What are you going to do about it? Okay.
And that is actual undue influence that should not be allowed, to be clear. But the problem that I had is that we're talking about whether or not officers are involved in primaries when the actual problem is when state parties are actively pulling resources away from candidates like the voter file and tilting the playing field in favor of their candidate. And we're supporting committees like the D-TRIP and DS that actively are putting their thumb on the scale in primaries. That's what I'm a lot more concerned about than what just somebody in a symbolic voluntary role is doing. And if we're gonna talk about neutrality, let's actually make it a real policy that is enforced, where if you are a state party putting your thumb on the scale for a certain candidate, that you do not get funding from the DNC anymore. That if you were active, if we wanna fund the D-TRIP or the DS and give them money, we should give them that money after primaries are over if those committees are gonna be involved in primaries, if we actually are serious about remaining neutral.
I couldn't agree more. That last point is absolutely critical. So look, to be fair to Ken Martin, he wasn't there when they were rigging things in 2016, 2020, or even 2024. And he actually did put my name on the Minnesota ballot when he had the authority in Minnesota. And I'll give him a lot of credit for that as well. So he was fair when he applied it that way. But what I was leading up to, David, is even if I agree with Ken on the bylaw issue, et cetera, when they then decided to do a second vote on this, like, oh, we have this rule, and oh, we are so concerned about this second rule we found against David Hogg, coincidentally, right? And now we're gonna do this vote and we're gonna oust him, but we would have done it otherwise. I was like, no, I don't believe you at all anymore. You're like, now they've lost all credibility. And it was obvious that they were targeting you. So why did they target you? Like, what do you think was the apparatus? Who was powerful enough, or maybe it's a collection of people that goes to Ken Martin and goes, no, we're done with this kid, right? And why did they do it? Who are they? And tell us how you think that worked.
You know, I think it's probably a combination of people who were, one, I think there were moderates that certainly actively were involved in that, because I've said things about, for example, abolishing ICE when I was 18 years old. That was something that was repeatedly, brought up to me as like, oh, you have to address this as some kind of problem. Granted, we're seeing what's happening with ICE now. I think more than anything, it's, our party is an incumbent protection racket. Groups like the D-TRIP are funded by members of Congress. They are incentivized to keep their members in their positions of power so they can continue raising that same money and protect them. And the problem with our party is that we say that we want to change, at least we claim to want to, but ultimately we don't want to fundamentally change who we are, because a lot of the leaders of our party are incentivized to keep the power structures the same, keep the people in their same positions of power, even if it is collectively detrimental to our party. Because it is a lot easier to just say, oh, we need to focus on our messaging, we got to change our messaging, than it is to say we need to change our messengers in the first place. And I think when I announced that we were going to be doing this work to challenge some Democratic incumbents in safer seats that we felt like were failing to meet the moment, people like Shri Thanadar, who it literally spent just about $1 million in taxpayer dollars on self-promotional ads, or voted for Trump's crypto grift bill, they were inherently threatened by that and conspired to make sure that I was not in that position of power anymore. And also took people with real legitimate arguments that truly, in good faith, like yourself, Cenk, that want the DNC to remain as neutral as possible, and got them on their side to say, look, we just got to get rid of this guy because this is a rule change that has to go through, and it's not going to be possible if he does this work. So I was put in a position where I was told I have to choose between either being essentially in a symbolic role at the DNC, or my values and my literal job, which is running Leaders We Deserve. And every time I'm of course gonna have to choose my values and my job than a volunteer symbolic role.
Yeah, so last thing then, David, because you and I still have not given up on the Democratic Party, despite all of the faults and attacks against us personally, et cetera, right? But it appears to me, and of course I've thought this for a long time, but especially given what you're saying today, that the incumbents are the entrenched power, right? So and unfortunately, we are past the tipping point. The great majority of those incumbents got there through money in politics, right? Through massive PAC donations from corporations, people who support foreign governments, et cetera, right? So those guys are going to control the party. They are the party, right? So change from the inside, I think, is literally impossible because they've entrenched the power around the PAC donations, right? And all the lobbies, et cetera. So it seems to me that it's the only way to change the party is from the outside. That you have to go outside the party, primary incumbents, seize power, seize state parties, et cetera, and that there is no other way to do it other than that kind of rebellion or revolution within the Democratic Party.
Pretty much. I mean, look, I believe the reason why I ran to be a vice chair is because I believe in, instead of just saying, oh man, this car sucks, it's not gonna go anywhere, we gotta fix the car so we actually can go somewhere. And it's a lot harder to try to fix the car, to try to take the engine apart, to try to get the wheels spinning, everything like that. I wanted to try, at least, to say, you know what, I gave it a shot to try to fix it on the inside. And we saw what ended up happening, right? And of course, a lot of that is around disagreements around the neutrality in the DNC, which ultimately I think we're on the same side of. It's just a matter of the implementation of that policy and when it started and the precedent that we were setting of changing the bylaws after the election. But I think we have no other choice but to show the institutions and the incumbents that there is either you need to get your act together, or you're going to be defeated. And that's what we're trying to do at Leaders We Deserve with our friends over at Justice Democrats and a lot of our other partners as well, is to ensure that we are building a Democratic Party that is not just defined by telling people how we're just not Republicans and that's why you should vote for us. A party that is defined by the amount of harm that we don't do, but instead a party that is defined by the amount of good that we do, the amount of good governance that we do to make the government actually work and protect everyday Americans from special interests that are actively corrupting our government, taking over groups like the Democratic Party, where we say, in one of the briefings that we had at the DNC, one of the first things they're like, we can't take corporate money because we are a party and we're not allowed to take corporate money. And then you look at the FEC reports and you see the Employee Association for Lockheed Martin gave the DNC $10,000 or whatever it was. That's just bullshit, right? It's gonna have to be people from the outside that are not only better, but are significantly better than the incumbents and repeatedly show that not only that doing the right thing is politically advantageous. And if you don't, and you're not on the right side of history of standing against these special interests, of standing against the oligarchs, of standing against groups that seek to just empower the people that are already powerful right now, instead of helping everyday people, that you're gonna be defeated.
Yeah, look, what I would say to the audience as we part here is support Democratic policies, not politicians. So unfortunately, the politicians have lost their way, and they're not fighting for those policies at all, the current incumbents. Now, mind you, the people that David's supporting through Leaders We Deserve, I'm supporting through Rebellion PAC or any other thing that we're doing, or all the other wonderful organizations, progressive, left-wing, populist, whatever it might be, outsiders, change agents, please go support them, because that's still supporting the Democratic. In fact, that's in my opinion, David, it's the best way we can support the Democratic Party, not by blindly supporting their incumbents, whether they do our policies or they don't, but by supporting the policies and the people that are fighting for those policies from the outside. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's what we're trying to do at Leaders We Deserve. I think it's only going to be through ruthless competition in safe Democratic seats in our primaries that we're going to challenge ourselves to actually get better. If there's anything I learned from activism, it's that comfortable politicians don't change shit. And there are way too many comfortable people in our party right now who repeatedly talk about, oh my God, we're living in a fascist time and there's an authoritarian takeover, but certainly don't sound like it. Don't seem like they're actually fighting. And I think if they don't get their act together, they should be challenged. And we only stand to benefit from that at the end of the day. And if people want to support the work that we're doing, like you mentioned, to ensure that we have that independence to do this work and be driven by our principles and our mission, even when there are people who come to us that say, oh, you supported somebody like Zohran, I'm not going to support you anymore. The best way you can help us continue that work is by donating just like $5 a month, if you can, at leaderswedeserve.com.
All right, David Hogg, president of Leaders We Deserve. Thank you for joining us, brother. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. We had a lot of interviews for you guys. Action-packed show today. I'll do a bonus episode for you guys tomorrow, and I'll have to give you 2 stories for the price of 1. But for today, that's all we got. Love you. We'll see you tomorrow.